Hello, my dear listeners. I hope you enjoy listening to the story.
15 years ago, I signed a death certificate that set a killer free because I was too tired to look 1 minute longer. That killer now sits at my daughter's dinner table, calls me sir, kisses his wife's forehead every morning, and every night at 11 o'clock, quietly unlocks a kitchen drawer to measure half a teaspoon of white powder into the smoothie my daughter and my 8-year-old grandson will share for breakfast. In 40 years of being her father, I have never once told my daughter I love her. And now 35 years of reading the dead are telling me that if I do not act, I will lose her before I ever get the chance to say it. But I need to start at the beginning. Not the locked drawer or the white powder or the man who calls me sir. Before all of that. Before I knew what he was, there were roses. The roses needed water again. They always needed water. Every morning, 6 o'clock sharp, before the Houston heat turned the soil to powder and the petals to paper. I stood on the back porch in my undershirt and slippers, garden hose in one hand, coffee mug in the other, watching the spray catch the early light and throw tiny rainbows across the fence Catherine had painted white the summer before she got sick. 4 years of watering another woman's garden. 4 years of keeping alive what she had planted, because letting the roses die felt too much like letting her die a second time. My name is Walter Pennington. I am 68 years old. I spent 35 years as chief forensic pathologist for Harris County, Houston, Texas. 312 autopsies a year at my peak. And now I water roses. That is what retirement looks like when the only person who made your house feel like a home is a photograph on a bookshelf. Catherine's photo sat in the living room, beside the window where morning sun hit it just right, so her smile seemed warm instead of frozen. I talked to her every night, not because I believed in ghosts. I talked to her because 40 years of sharing every thought with one person creates a groove in your brain that death cannot fill. The words come whether she is listening or not. Last night I told her about the leak in the kitchen faucet. The night before, about a cardinal on the mailbox. The currency of a man with no one left to spend it on. On the bookshelf beside her photograph sat a jewelry box. Dark oak, brass hinges. Catherine had left it with specific instructions written on a yellow sticky note in her shaking hand during those final weeks. For Meredith, only open when she truly needs her mother. I had given it to Meredith after the funeral. As far as I knew, she had never opened it. Grief makes you avoid the things that carry the weight of the person you lost. I understood that. I had not opened Catherine's side of the closet since the week after the funeral. Her dresses still hung in the dark, holding the shape of a woman who no longer wore them. And I could not bring myself to touch them, because touching them meant accepting that the body they had once covered was gone. Meredith, my daughter, 40 years old, English literature teacher at a high school in Austin, married to a man named Craig, mother of twin boys. She called once a week, usually Sunday evenings, and the conversations lasted exactly 12 minutes. I knew because I timed them, not intentionally. The clock on the kitchen wall sat directly in my line of sight when I stood at the counter holding the phone. 12 minutes to cover weather, the boys, school gossip, and a polite inquiry about my health that never waited for a detailed answer. 12 minutes was the distance between a daughter who loved her father and a daughter who did not know how to be in the same room with him anymore. I understood why. 35 years of forensic pathology had made me the kind of father who identified bacteria survival temperatures in undercooked beef and announced them at the dinner table while everyone else was trying to enjoy pot roast. When Meredith's friends asked what her father did for a living, she said doctor. Just doctor. She left out the part about the dead people. I picked up my phone from the porch railing, scrolled to Meredith's name. My thumb hovered over the call button the way it did every morning, trembling slightly, not from age but from the weight of a question I could never answer. Would she want to hear from me? Or would my voice on the other end feel like another obligation? I was 68 years old, and the thing I feared most was not death. I had spent 35 years with death. I feared becoming the father whose calls go to voicemail, the father whose name on the screen makes his daughter sigh before answering, the father who is loved out of duty rather than desire. I set the phone down. She was busy. My call would interrupt something. It always interrupted something. The hose sputtered. I moved to the red roses Catherine had planted for our 40th anniversary. She had knelt in this dirt with gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat, telling me these roses would outlast both of us. She had been right about the roses, wrong about the both of us part. I had never told Meredith I loved her, not once in 40 years. Not because the feeling was absent, because my generation expressed love through presence and provision. You showed up. You paid the bills. You fixed what was broken. I paid off the mortgage 8 years early, sent Meredith through college without $1 of debt, and I thought that was enough. Catherine had tried to tell me it would not. Meredith does not need your checkbook. Walter, she needs to hear you say it. But Catherine was the translator between us, converting my silence into something Meredith could understand. And when the translator died, the two remaining speakers discovered they had been speaking different languages all along. My phone buzzed. Meredith. A text. Dad, come to Austin for dinner Friday. Craig is cooking. The boys miss you. My chest tightened. She almost never initiated. Something felt different. I read the message 3 times, searching for subtext, the way I searched tissue samples for anomalies. Then I typed, I would love to. See you Friday. 3 hours on Interstate 35. That was the distance between loneliness and the possibility of something better. I set down the hose, walked inside, and started packing a bag. The roses would survive one morning without me. They always did. They were stronger than I gave them credit for. I wondered if the same was true for my daughter. The drive from Houston to Austin took 3 hours and 14 minutes on a clear day, and I spent every one of them rehearsing how to be a normal father. Do not mention bacteria. Do not comment on refrigeration temperatures. Do not examine anyone's skin color under the dining room light. Do not, under any circumstances, use the word pathology at the dinner table. 3 hours of coaching myself to act like a man who had spent 35 years selling insurance instead of 35 years reading the dead. Craig opened the front door before I knocked. Tall, clean-shaven, polo shirt tucked into khakis. The kind of man who looked like he had been assembled from a catalog for dependable husbands. He extended his hand with that firm, deliberate grip he always used on me. "Sir, come in. Good to have you." He had called me sir since the day Meredith introduced us 3 years ago, and it had never once sounded forced. Some men use sir as a weapon of distance. Craig used it as a handshake, warm and practiced and impossible to refuse. Owen hit me at waist level before I cleared the doorway. Grandpa. His arms wrapped around my midsection with the desperate strength of an 8-year-old who had been counting down the hours. Noah waved from the sofa, quieter, already reading a book about dinosaurs, raising one hand without looking up. My boys, fraternal twins, different as weather and architecture. Owen was motion and noise. Noah was stillness and pages. I loved them both with a ferocity that frightened me. Because loving grandchildren means knowing you will not be there for all of it. And every visit feels like borrowed time. Meredith appeared from the kitchen. She smiled, and my trained eye catalogued what the smile was trying to hide before I could stop it. She was thinner than last month. The hollows beneath her cheekbones were deeper, casting small shadows that had not been there at Easter. Her skin carried a pallor that most people would attribute to indoor living or seasonal change. But I had spent 3 decades distinguishing healthy pale from sick pale. And this was the second kind. She hugged me. Her arms felt lighter. "Dad, you made it. Traffic okay?" "Fine," I said, holding her a beat too long, feeling her shoulder blades sharper against my palms than I remembered. A woman I had not met stepped into the hallway carrying a tall glass filled with something green and thick. She was in her late 30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing medical scrubs with a name badge I could not read from across the room. She smiled at Meredith with professional warmth. "Here you go. Meredith, your afternoon supplement? Turmeric, spirulina, and iron. You will feel the difference by next week." She handed the glass to my daughter. Meredith drank without hesitating. Craig appeared beside me. "That is Denise Palmer, private wellness nurse. Meredith has been dealing with chronic fatigue, and her doctor recommended nutritional support. Denise comes highly recommended from the hospital network. He said it the way you describe a kitchen renovation. Matter of fact. Already handled. We sat for dinner. Craig had cooked roasted chicken with vegetables and mashed potatoes. He served Meredith first, cutting her chicken into smaller pieces without being asked, as though this were routine. He kissed her forehead when he set the plate down. "Eat slow, babe. No rush." Owen chattered about his science project. Noah asked if I knew what a Pachycephalosaurus ate. Craig laughed at the right moments, refilled glasses before they were empty, touched Meredith's hand across the table with a tenderness that looked like love and smelled like rehearsal, except I could not tell the difference anymore. And that uncertainty was its own kind of torment. I watched Meredith pour my coffee after dinner. Her hand trembled. The stream of liquid wobbled, tracing a jagged line from pot to cup. Not the tremor of nervousness or cold. I had seen this tremor before, on autopsy tables, in photographs of poisoning victims whose nervous systems had been slowly dismantled by heavy metals over weeks and months. This was peripheral neuropathy tremor, the kind that starts in the fingertips and works inward, the kind caused by arsenic or thallium or lead accumulating in tissue faster than the body can flush it. I set down my fork. My eyes moved to her fingernails, and I saw it. I did not want to see it. I begged my brain to unsee it. But 35 years of forensic pattern recognition does not come with an off switch, and the white horizontal lines running across Meredith's nail beds were as legible to me as words on a page. Mace lines. Transverse leukonychia caused by arsenic disrupting keratin production in the nail matrix. I had documented mace lines on over 40 cadavers in my career. Every single one of them had been poisoned. I slid my phone under the table, angled the camera, pressed the shutter button 3 times while pretending to check a text message. 3 photographs of my daughter's fingernails taken in secret at her own dinner table. Because the man sitting across from me, the one who called me sir and cut her chicken into small pieces, was either the most devoted husband in Texas or something I did not have the courage to name yet. Owen tugged my sleeve. Grandpa, is Mama sick? She shakes a lot. How come she shakes so much? The table went quiet. Craig looked at Owen with practiced parental calm. Mama is just tired. Buddy, the doctor is helping. Meredith nodded, smiled weakly, and took another sip of her green supplement. I watched her drink it. I watched Denise Palmer watching her drink it from the kitchen doorway. And the thing that scared me most was not what I saw. It was knowing that if I said any of it out loud, I would lose my daughter before the truth had a chance to save her. I pulled into a gas station outside Temple, Texas, at 9:47 that night. The highway behind me was empty, just headlights and lane markers and the low hum of an engine that had carried me 112 miles without my conscious participation. My hands had driven. My brain had been somewhere else entirely, looping through images I could not stop reviewing. The tremor in Meredith's wrist, the white lines on her nails, the way Denise Palmer had watched my daughter drink that green glass of something with the focused attention of a nurse monitoring dosage. Not health. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the air conditioner pushing stale, cold air against my face. My phone lay on the passenger seat. Screen dark. Evelyn Marsh's name 1 thumb press away. 1 call. That was all it took. 1 call and the machinery would start. The gears of investigation that I knew how to operate better than any machine in my life. 1 call and I would stop being a retired old man watering roses and become something my daughter had spent 20 years begging me not to be. The father who sees death in everything. The father who cannot eat dinner without diagnosing the table. 3 years ago, I had noticed something off about a colleague of Meredith's at a school fundraiser. The man's pupils were asymmetric, his speech slightly slurred, his gait unsteady in a way that suggested neurological compromise rather than alcohol. I mentioned it to Meredith on the drive home. She had pulled the car over and stared at me with an expression I will carry to my grave. "Dad," she had said, her voice flat and final. "You cannot stop. You cannot look at a living human being without performing an autopsy. Mr. Henderson is not a corpse on your table. He is my colleague. And I am done explaining to people that my father is not diagnosing them. He is just like that. She had not spoken to me for 6 months after that. Catherine spent half a year making phone calls, sending photographs of the twins, gently nudging the bridge back into place, plank by plank. Catherine was good at that. Catherine was the only person in the world who could translate my clinical observations into the language of concern rather than accusation. Catherine was dead. There was no translator left. If I called Evelyn, if I started this, and I was wrong, Meredith would never speak to me again. This time there would be no Catherine to rebuild what I destroyed. This time the silence would be permanent. But the maze lines. I opened my phone and looked at the photographs I had taken under the table. 3 images, slightly blurred from the angle, but clear enough. White horizontal bands across the nail bed of my daughter's right index finger. In 35 years of forensic work, I had never once seen mace lines caused by anything other than heavy metal poisoning. Not once. Not in 312 autopsies a year. Not in any of the 67 published papers I had reviewed on arsenic toxicity. Mace lines were not ambiguous. They were not open to interpretation. They were the body's written confession that something was destroying it from the inside. Slowly, deliberately, with the patience of someone who understood that poison works best when no one is looking for it. I drove the remaining 90 minutes to Houston in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the road and the photographs, and the question that sat in my chest like a stone. When I got home, I did what I always did. I stood in front of Catherine's photograph on the bookshelf. The frame was cool under my fingers, her smile unchanged, permanent, the way only photographs can preserve a moment of happiness and make it feel like mockery when happiness has left the building. Catherine, I said, I see something wrong with Meredith, the same way I have always seen things wrong with people, the way you used to kick me under the table for. But this time it is not asymmetric pupils at a fundraiser. This time it is arsenic lines on our daughter's fingernails. And if I am right, then someone in that house is poisoning her. And if I am wrong, I lose her forever. What do I do? The photograph did not answer. It never did. But I imagined what Catherine would say. Because after 40 years, you know a person's voice so well, you can generate it from memory, like a song you have heard 10,000 times. She would say, "You are always right about the medicine, Walter, and you are always wrong about the delivery. This time, do not deliver. Prove." I picked up my phone, dialed Evelyn Marsh. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sharp and alert despite the hour. The way retired forensic professionals always answer late calls because late calls in our world meant somebody was dead. I described the symptoms in clinical sequence. Peripheral tremor consistent with arsenic neuropathy. Mace lines on the nail bed indicating chronic heavy metal exposure. Progressive weight loss and pallor over a period I estimated at 3 to 5 months. based on photographic comparison with images from Easter. Evelyn was quiet for 5 seconds. In our profession, 5 seconds of silence meant the person on the other end was running differential diagnoses and eliminating them one by one. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. Walter, if this were any patient other than your daughter, you would have called law enforcement already. Do not let love make you slower than science. She was right. If a stranger had shown me those fingernails at a medical conference, I would have flagged it in seconds. But Meredith was not a stranger. Meredith was the girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to name all 206 bones in the human body as a bedtime story. Meredith was my daughter, and diagnosing your daughter with poisoning while sitting in your dark apartment at 11:30 at night felt less like medicine and more like madness. I need hair and urine samples, I told Evelyn. Can you run the toxicology, send them priority, she said. I will have results in 72 hours. And Walter. She paused. There are cases I wish I had looked at more carefully. Do not let this become one of them. I hung up, sat in the dark, talked to Catherine one more time. I am about to do the thing Meredith will hate me for, but I cannot look at those lines and do nothing. I am sorry. The photograph stared back. The roses outside needed water. I would deal with them in the morning. Tonight I had a different kind of growing to tend to. The kind that only grows in the dark, fed by suspicion, watered by evidence, and rooted in the terrifying possibility that the man who called me sir was killing my daughter one breakfast smoothie at a time. I returned to Austin the following Saturday with a purpose I disguised as paternal affection. Brought flowers for Meredith, a dinosaur book for Noah, and a model rocket kit for Owen. The gifts were real. The reason for the visit was not. Tucked inside my overnight bag, beneath a change of clothes and a toothbrush, were 2 sterile evidence collection bags I had kept from my years at the Harris County morgue. Hospital-grade polyethylene, tamper evidence seals, chain of custody labels on the side. The tools of my former profession, packed like contraband in my own suitcase. Craig met me at the door again. Sir, welcome back. 2 weekends in a row. Meredith will be thrilled. His handshake was the same. Warm, confident, calibrated to convey sincerity without overreach. I shook his hand and wondered if the fingers wrapped around mine were the same fingers that opened a locked drawer at 11 o'clock at night and measured white powder into a blender. Then I smiled and said, could not stay away from those boys. Lunch was sandwiches on the back patio. Craig had prepared everything. Turkey and avocado for Meredith, ham and cheese for the boys, something with arugula and prosciutto for himself and me. He handed Meredith her plate with a napkin folded into a triangle. I made yours with extra avocado. Healthy fats, babe. The doctor said it helps with absorption. She thanked him. He kissed her hair. I ate my sandwich and counted the seconds between each micro-expression of care, each perfectly timed gesture of concern, and wondered whether love and performance could really be this indistinguishable from the outside. Owen sat beside me. His weight leaned against my arm the way children lean when they trust someone completely. boneless and warm and unguarded. He ate half his sandwich, then put it down and rested his head on my shoulder. Grandpa, I am so sleepy. Is that normal? I am sleepy all the time now. My stomach dropped. I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were slightly glassy, the lids heavier than they should be at 1 in the afternoon. His skin, normally the warm brown of his mother's complexion, carried an undertone of gray that I recognized with the certainty of a man who had catalogued skin pallor on 300 corpses a year for 35 years. Owen, buddy. How long have you been feeling sleepy? I asked, keeping my voice light. I do not know. A few weeks, maybe. Mama is sleepy too. We are both sleepy. Are we sick the same way? Grandpa? Noah, sitting across the table, looked perfectly healthy, bright-eyed, animated, already back to his dinosaur book. The difference between the twins was visible now that I was looking for it, and the reason crystallized in my mind with sickening clarity. Owen shared breakfast with Meredith every morning. The two of them sat at the kitchen island while Craig served smoothies, mother and son, same meal, same glass, same routine. Noah preferred cereal, ate separately, served himself. Whatever was in those smoothies was reaching both of them. My daughter and my grandson, the same source, the same poison. I excused myself to use the bathroom. Walked down the hallway, past the family photographs on the wall, past Owen's finger paintings and Noah's report cards, and a framed wedding photo of Craig and Meredith smiling under an arch of white flowers. I stepped into the master bathroom and closed the door. The lock clicked. I stood there for 10 seconds, breathing through my mouth. Meredith's hairbrush sat on the vanity beside the sink. Dark strands woven through the bristles. More than should be there. More than was normal for a healthy 40-year-old woman. Hair loss. Another symptom. I pulled 6 strands carefully from the brush, root intact, and placed them in the first evidence bag. Sealed it. Wrote on the label with a pen from my pocket. Sample A, hair. M, Pennington Hollowell. Collected Saturday. My handwriting was steady. My hand was not. The second sample was harder. I flushed the toilet, ran the water, then moved to the boys' bathroom across the hall. Owen had used it earlier, before lunch. The toilet had not been flushed. Boys that age do not flush. I knelt beside the bowl with the second evidence bag and collected what I needed. Sample B, urine. O, Hollowell. Collected Saturday. I sealed it, washed my hands twice, and stood looking at myself in the mirror above the sink. A 68-year-old man in his daughter's bathroom, kneeling beside a toilet, collecting forensic evidence against his son-in-law while the family ate sandwiches on the patio 20 feet away. This was what I had become. Or maybe this was what I had always been. And retirement had just been a costume I wore over the uniform that never really came off. I walked back to the patio, sat down. Owen had fallen asleep against the arm of his chair, head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck sore when he woke up. Craig was telling Meredith about a property deal he was working on. Something about commercial leases in the Domain District. His voice was relaxed, authoritative, the voice of a man in complete control of his surroundings. Meredith listened with half-closed eyes. too tired to engage fully, nodding at intervals that did not always align with what Craig was saying. I drove back to Houston at 4 in the afternoon. The 2 evidence bags sat in my overnight bag on the passenger seat. They weighed almost nothing. A few strands of hair, a few milliliters of liquid. The combined physical weight was negligible. The moral weight was something else entirely. I was carrying my daughter's biology in a forensic evidence bag because I believed her husband was killing her, and the only way to prove it was to treat my family like a crime scene. I pulled over twice on Interstate 35, not because of traffic, because my hands would not stop shaking, not the clinical tremor of a neurological condition. The tremor of a man who has just collected evidence that will either save his daughter or destroy what remains of their relationship. And there is no third option. And the road ahead is 3 hours long, and the silence in the car is the loudest sound he has ever heard. I mailed the samples to Evelyn by priority courier Monday morning. Then I waited. 72 hours. 3 days. I watered Catherine's roses each morning, talked to her photograph each night, and counted the hours the way I used to count slides under a microscope, methodically, patiently, knowing that what I found would change everything and wishing I could stop looking. Evelyn called on Wednesday. I was standing in my kitchen, rinsing my coffee mug, staring at a cardinal on the back fence that Catherine would have named if she were alive. She named every bird that visited our yard. Gerald the blue jay, Marjorie the mockingbird. Absurd names for wild animals. And I had loved her for every one of them. The phone vibrated on the counter. Evelyn's name on the screen. I picked it up and knew before she spoke, because I recognized the register of her voice. In 35 years of working alongside Evelyn Marsh in the Harris County Forensic Lab, I had heard her deliver results in exactly 3 tones. The first was clinical, brisk, efficient, the tone she used when findings were routine. Cause of death, blunt force trauma, next case. The second was animated, slightly elevated, the tone of professional excitement when a case presented something unusual or challenging. The third was quiet, low, careful, the tone she reserved for conversations with families of victims. When the results were not just data, but demolition, she used the third tone now. Walter. She paused. I could hear papers rustling. I ran the samples twice. Full-spectrum heavy metal panel, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, cross-referenced with gas chromatography. Arsenic. Meredith's hair sample shows arsenic levels at 4 times the normal biological threshold. The distribution along the hair shaft indicates chronic exposure over approximately 3 to 5 months. Owen's urine shows arsenic at 1.5 times normal. Lower concentration, consistent with secondary exposure through shared food source rather than direct targeting. She paused again. Walter. Someone is poisoning both of them. I sat down. Not voluntarily. My legs simply decided they were done holding me and folded. The kitchen chair caught me. The cardinal was still on the fence. The coffee mug was still in the sink. The world looked exactly the same as it had 30 seconds ago. Except now it was a world where my daughter and my grandson had arsenic in their bodies, and someone was putting it there on purpose. I had known. Since the moment I saw those mace lines at the dinner table, some part of me had known. But knowing and hearing the numbers are different animals. Knowing is suspicion with an asterisk, a maybe, an escape hatch that allows you to lie in bed at night and tell yourself you might be wrong. Hearing 4 times normal is a door slamming shut. There is no asterisk. There is no maybe. There is only the number and what the number means. Evelyn continued, her voice steady but careful. The exposure pattern suggests controlled dosing. Arsenic administered in small quantities over an extended period, enough to cause progressive deterioration without triggering acute symptoms that would send a physician to test for heavy metals. This is not accidental contamination. Walter, accidental exposure produces irregular concentration patterns in hair. This is consistent, methodical. Whoever is doing this understands dosing curves. I tried to respond. My mouth opened. Nothing came out for several seconds, and during those seconds I was not Walter Pennington the father. I was Walter Pennington the forensic pathologist, and my brain ran the differential the way it had run 10,000 differentials before. Arsenic does not walk into smoothies by itself. It does not drift in through windows or condense from air conditioning. It is placed by someone who has access to the victim's food supply, who controls the preparation environment, who can administer a precise dose repeatedly without detection. Someone in the house, someone trusted. I saw Craig standing at the kitchen counter at 11 o'clock at night. The locked drawer, the white powder, the half-teaspoon stirred into the blender, the kiss on Meredith's forehead as he handed her the glass. Drink up, babe. Doctor says you need iron. Who has access to their food? Evelyn asked, though I suspected she already knew the answer. Craig, her husband. He prepares all her meals. He makes the smoothies every morning. There is also a nurse named Denise Palmer who handles supplementation. She brings herbal mixtures, vitamin blends. Either one of them has access. But I saw Craig Fay. I caught myself. I saw Craig preparing the smoothie at night. Locked drawer. White substance. Measured dose. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that cut through my paralysis like a scalpel. You have biological evidence of poisoning, Walter. You do not have legal evidence of who is administering it. Hair samples prove exposure, not source. Urine confirms active contamination, not perpetrator identity. If you go to police right now, they will open an investigation that Craig will see coming. He will stop dosing. Meredith's symptoms will stabilize. Doctors will call it recovery. And 3 months later, when attention fades, he will start again. I have seen this pattern. So what do? I asked. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. You go back, she said. You observe, you document. You build a case that does not give him room to maneuver, and you do it without telling Meredith. Because if she confronts him and he knows you are investigating, he will accelerate the timeline or disappear. I have seen that pattern too. You are asking me to surveil my daughter's household, I said. I am asking you to save your daughter's life, she said. Because that is what the numbers say is at stake. Not a marriage, not money. Her life and Owen's. I hung up, sat in my kitchen for 40 minutes without moving. The cardinal left the fence. The coffee in the sink went cold. The sun moved across the floor in a stripe of light that crawled from the table leg to the refrigerator while I sat there understanding, truly understanding for the first time, that the man who called me sir, who shook my hand at the door, who cut my daughter's chicken into small pieces and kissed her forehead and carried my grandson on his shoulders, was killing them both. Slowly, patiently, with the precision of someone who had done this before or studied how. 35 years on the forensic table had taught me one immutable truth about poisoners. They are patient because they are confident. They are confident because they are invisible. And they are invisible because the people they are killing love them. Meredith loved Craig. Owen called him Dad. And love is the best camouflage a murderer can wear, because no one autopsies the person who brings you flowers and holds your hand in the emergency room and whispers, "Everything will be okay," while measuring your dose for the morning. I picked up the phone again, texted Evelyn, "I will go back this weekend. I will observe. I will build the case. And I will not tell Meredith until the evidence is so overwhelming that belief is not optional." She replied in under a minute, "Good. And Walter, be careful." The most dangerous moment in any poisoning investigation is when the poisoner realizes someone is watching. I set the phone down and looked at Catherine's photograph across the room. 4 times normal, I told her. Our daughter has 4 times normal arsenic in her hair. Our grandson has 1.5. And the man who did it will sit across from me at dinner this Saturday and call me sir and ask about my back pain, and I will have to smile and thank him and eat whatever he puts on my plate. That is what is next. Catherine. That is what comes after the numbers. The photograph did not answer. The roses outside needed water. I did not move. I returned to Austin the following weekend with the discipline of a man walking into an operating theater. Every gesture rehearsed. Every reaction pre-calibrated. I was not visiting my daughter. I was conducting a forensic observation of a live crime scene. And the most critical variable was my own face. Because if Craig read suspicion in my eyes for even half a second, the investigation died, and my daughter died with it. Craig had invited me to stay overnight. "Sir, it is a long drive back in the dark. The guest room is made up. Meredith would love having you for breakfast." His generosity felt like a trap baited with hospitality. But I accepted because proximity was evidence, and evidence was survival. Dinner was uneventful. Craig cooked salmon with roasted asparagus and a lemon butter sauce that he served with the presentation of a man who watched cooking shows and practiced until each plate looked like a photograph. Meredith ate half her portion and pushed the rest around with her fork. She was thinner than last week. The hollows beneath her eyes had deepened into shadows that makeup could not fully conceal. Owen ate beside her, matching her exhaustion beat for beat, his fork drooping in his hand as though gravity had increased specifically for him. Noah ate with gusto, asked for seconds, vibrated with the energy his twin no longer possessed. The contrast between the brothers was a diagnosis in itself. After dinner, Craig cleared dishes while I played cards with Owen on the living room floor. The boy fell asleep mid-game, his hand still holding a 7 of hearts, his breathing shallow and slow. I covered him with a blanket and carried the memory of his weight in my arms for the rest of the night. Because that weight, the physical fact of a sleeping child trusting you to hold him, is the kind of evidence no laboratory can measure and no courtroom can admit. But it is the evidence that makes you willing to destroy everything else to keep it safe. 11:14 at night. The house was dark. Meredith and Craig had gone to bed an hour earlier. The twins were asleep in their room, Noah's nightlight casting a blue glow under their door. I lay on the guest room bed fully clothed, shoes on, staring at the ceiling, listening. At 11:19, I heard movement. Soft footsteps on hardwood, the kitchen. I moved to my door and opened it 2 inches, enough to see down the hallway without being visible. Craig stood at the kitchen counter in a t-shirt and boxers, lit by the stove light above the range. He opened the cabinet above the refrigerator, reached behind a row of cereal boxes, and produced a small key. Then he knelt and unlocked the bottom drawer beside the dishwasher. The one I had noticed was the only drawer in the kitchen with a keyhole. Inside the drawer was a container, small, opaque, no label. Craig removed it, unscrewed the lid, and tilted it over the blender sitting on the counter. I watched him tap the container twice with his index finger. A fine white powder fell into the blender in a quantity I estimated at roughly half a teaspoon. He screwed the lid back on, returned the container to the drawer, locked it, replaced the key behind the cereal boxes, and added frozen fruit, yogurt, and spinach to the blender. Then he sealed the blender lid and placed it in the refrigerator for the morning. The entire operation took 90 seconds. His movements were practiced, economical, devoid of hesitation. No fumbling, no checking over his shoulder, no sign of guilt or nervousness. He performed the routine the way a man brushes his teeth, automatically, from muscle memory built over months of repetition. I stood in the doorway with my heartbeat in my ears and my fists clenched so tight that my fingernails drew crescents into my palms. Every cell in my body wanted to walk into that kitchen, slam Craig against the refrigerator, and demand to know what was in that container. 35 years of restraint held me in place. Emotion destroys evidence. Confrontation without documentation creates deniability. I had watched 100 investigations collapse because someone acted on fury instead of procedure. I would not let my daughter become one of them. Craig turned off the stove light and walked back toward the master bedroom. As he passed the hallway, I eased my door shut to a crack and watched his silhouette move past. He paused at the boys' room, opened their door, looked in for 3 seconds, then closed it gently and continued to his bedroom. The gesture of a caring father checking on sleeping children. Performed by a man who had just measured poison into their morning meal. The bedroom door clicked shut. I heard the mattress creak as he got into bed beside Meredith. I imagined him settling against the pillow, perhaps reaching over to touch her shoulder, perhaps whispering good night, perhaps lying still with his eyes open, calculating timelines and dollar amounts while my daughter slept beside him with arsenic accumulating in her organs. I did not sleep. I lay on the guest bed with the ceiling above me and the evidence below me. One floor of hardwood separating me from the locked drawer and its contents. One hallway separating me from the man who smiled at me over salmon and called me sir, and was methodically murdering my daughter and my grandson with the patience of someone who understood that the best poisons are the ones administered by people the victims trust. At 2 a.m, I rose and walked silently to the master bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I looked through the gap. Craig lay on his back, one arm across his chest. Meredith slept beside him on her side, facing away. Craig's phone sat on the bedside table, screen down. As I watched, Craig reached over without opening his eyes, picked up Meredith's phone from her nightstand, entered the passcode with the fluency of someone who had memorized it long ago, opened what I could see was a banking application, scrolled, paused on a screen that showed a balance I could not read from the doorway, but knew from my own research was approximately $1.1 million. The inheritance from Catherine's mother. He took a screenshot, set the phone back. Then he reached across the pillow and stroked Meredith's hair once, gently, the way you might pet a sleeping animal you intend to sell. I stood in that hallway until my legs ached. 2 minutes of watching a man alternate between checking his wife's bank balance and stroking her hair, each gesture flowing into the other without transition. Tenderness and theft woven together so seamlessly that if I had not spent 35 years learning to separate performance from truth, I might have seen love. I returned to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, pressed my palms flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking, not from fear, from the specific kind of rage that has no outlet, because expressing it would cost more than containing it. And containing it feels like swallowing glass. And you swallow anyway because the alternative is spitting fire in a house full of sleeping children. Morning came the way mornings come when you have not slept. Not gradually, with stretching and yawning and the gentle return of consciousness. It came all at once, like a switch. Because I had been awake the entire night, and the only thing that changed between 3 a.m. and 7 was the light through the curtains shifting from black to gray to the pale gold of an Austin September. Craig was already in the kitchen when I emerged. He stood at the counter in fresh clothes, hair combed, pouring coffee from a French press with the precision of a man who understood that presentation mattered, even at 7:15 on a Saturday morning. Sir, good morning. Hope the guest room was comfortable. He slid a mug across the island toward me. Cream's in the fridge. Meredith is still sleeping. I am letting her rest. I took the mug. The coffee was excellent. Dark roast, smooth. No bitterness. I drank it while standing 3 feet from the man who had measured poison into a blender 8 hours earlier. And the distance between us felt simultaneously enormous and non-existent. Because I knew what he was, and he did not know that I knew. and that asymmetry of knowledge was the only weapon I possessed. He leaned against the counter, sipped his own coffee. His body language was relaxed, shoulders down, weight on one hip, the posture of a man who felt safe in his own kitchen. "Let me tell you something, sir. I worry about Meredith. Really worry. The chronic fatigue thing is getting worse. The doctor says it is stress-related, maybe hormonal, but I am not convinced. I have been researching nutritional deficiency syndromes, autoimmune conditions, environmental factors. Denise has been incredible with the supplement regimen, but I wonder if we need a specialist." He delivered this monologue with the earnestness of a husband who had lost sleep over his wife's declining health. His brow furrowed at the right moments. His voice dropped to the register of genuine concern at the mention of specialists. He even rubbed the back of his neck, the universal gesture of a man burdened by worry he cannot share. Every micro-expression was calibrated, every word selected. If I had not watched him measure white powder into a blender at 11:19 the previous night, I would have believed every syllable. That was the part that made my stomach turn. Not his cruelty, his craftsmanship. I matched his tone. "Have you considered an environmental toxicology panel? Sometimes older homes have lead in the pipes or residual contamination in the soil. It might explain why Owen is fatigued too, if it is something in the shared environment." I was testing him, watching for the micro-reaction to the word toxicology. Most people would not flinch. A man who was actively poisoning his wife and stepson would register the word differently. A fractional tightening of the jaw, a half-second delay before the next sentence. The involuntary dilation of pupils when the brain encounters a threat word in otherwise safe conversation. Craig showed nothing, not a flicker. He nodded thoughtfully, as though considering my suggestion with genuine interest. "That is a great point, sir. I will mention it to the doctor. Environmental factors. Could be the water, could be the HVAC system. This house was built in 2003, so lead pipes are unlikely. But you never know with these Texas contractors." He smiled. "See, this is why I am glad you are here. Fresh perspective. He was good. Better than good. He was the most polished performer I had encountered in 35 years of studying human behavior across autopsy tables and witness stands and interrogation room recordings. Most people who lie carry the lie in their body somewhere. A twitch, a gaze aversion, a shift in posture that betrays the gap between what they are saying and what they are doing. Craig carried nothing. His body and his words were perfectly aligned, which meant either he was innocent and I was destroying my family with paranoid projection, or he was so practiced at deception that the lie had become the truth inside his own nervous system. The blender sat on the counter, rinsed but not washed. The locked drawer was closed, unremarkable, identical to every other drawer in the kitchen. The key was behind the cereal boxes in the upper cabinet. I knew. He did not know I knew. And that invisible line of knowledge was the only thing keeping my daughter alive. Because the moment Craig discovered he was being watched, the calculus changed in ways I could not predict or control. Meredith came downstairs at 8:30, moving slowly, holding the railing. Craig poured her smoothie from the blender into a tall glass, added a straw, carried it to her at the table. Morning, babe. Made your favorite. Extra spinach today. She took the glass, sipped. Thank you, baby. He sat beside her and rubbed her back in slow circles while she drank. Owen appeared in pajamas, yawning, and Craig poured a smaller portion into a second glass. Here you go, buddy. Growing boys need their greens. I watched my grandson drink from the same blender that contained whatever was in that locked drawer. I watched Meredith finish her glass and hand it back to Craig with a tired smile. I watched Craig rinse both glasses in the sink, humming a song I did not recognize. And I understood with the clarity of a man who has spent his life reading crime scenes that this kitchen was a crime scene. The blender was the weapon. The locked drawer was the ammunition storage. And the victims were sitting at the table thanking their killer for breakfast. Owen wandered over to me. Grandpa, will you stay? Mom says you might leave today. I looked at him. His eyes were glassy again. Tired. 9 years old and tired at 8:45 in the morning after 10 hours of sleep. I will come back, I said. I promise. He hugged me. I felt the wire of his ribs through his pajama shirt, thinner than they should be, and I held him and made a promise I intended to keep with every remaining year of my life. I drove back to Houston that afternoon, carrying the weight of everything I had seen and nothing I could yet prove. And the distance between seeing and proving felt like the distance between life and death. Because for Meredith and Owen, it was. I spent 4 days preparing what I would say. I wrote drafts on legal pads, crossed them out, rewrote them, rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning while the shower ran, so I could hear my own voice through the steam and judge whether I sounded like a concerned father or a lunatic. Every version failed. There is no script for telling your daughter that her husband is poisoning her. There is no arrangement of syllables that makes that sentence sound rational rather than insane. I settled on the clinical approach. Present the evidence. Meese lines. Tremor patterns. Owen's matching fatigue. Let the medicine speak because my words had never been good enough for Meredith, and maybe science could reach her where emotion could not. I drove to Austin on a Tuesday morning without calling ahead. Unannounced arrivals are a surveillance technique, but this was not surveillance. This was desperation dressed in a collared shirt and driving gloves. Meredith answered the door. She looked surprised, not unpleasantly, but with the slight disorientation of a woman whose routine had been interrupted. Dad, you did not call. Is everything okay? Everything was not okay. Nothing was okay. But I smiled and said, I was in the area. Wanted to check on you. Can I come in? Craig was at work. The boys were at school. Denise was not scheduled until Thursday. It was just us. Father and daughter, alone in a house I now understood to be a crime scene. Sitting on a sofa that smelled like lemon furniture polish and deception. I started gently. Meredith, I have been noticing some things about your health that concern me, not as a father being overprotective, as someone with medical training who recognizes specific patterns. She stiffened. The atmospheric pressure in the room changed the way it changes before a thunderstorm. Molecular, invisible, undeniable. Dad, please do not start. Your hands. I continued, keeping my voice level, clinical, the tone I used to deliver findings to attorneys. The tremor is consistent with peripheral neuropathy. There are lines on your fingernails called maze lines that indicate heavy metal exposure. Owen shows similar fatigue patterns. I believe someone in this household is introducing a toxic substance into your shared food supply. I watched her face move through 3 stages in 4 seconds. Confusion, recognition, then something I had seen only once before, on the day she told me she was done apologizing for my profession. It was the look of a daughter who has finally confirmed that her father is exactly what she always feared he was. She stood up. Her voice was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was cold. You cannot stop, can you? You literally cannot stop. You are retired. Dad. You have been retired for 5 years. You are not a doctor anymore. You are not anyone's pathologist. You are an old man who waters roses and talks to a photograph of his dead wife because you have no one else to talk to. And now you are standing in my living room, diagnosing my husband as a poisoner based on my fingernails. Meredith, the evidence. What evidence she was shaking now? Not the arsenic tremor, but the tremor of fury. You looked at my nails at dinner. You examined me like I am one of your corpses, like I am lying on your table and you are dictating findings into a recorder. I tried. The lab results. Lab results. She stepped back. You tested something. Did you take something from my house, Dad? Did you steal my hair or something and send it to a lab? The silence was my confession. Oh my God. Her hands went to her face. You are insane. You are actually insane. Craig told me this would happen. He said you were showing signs. He said losing Mom broke something in you and you would start seeing pathology in everyone around you because that is all you know how to do. I told him he was wrong. I defended you. And here you are proving him right. Craig told you I was showing signs. The sentence detonated in my chest. Craig had preemptively diagnosed me. He had seeded the narrative before I arrived, told Meredith her father was mentally deteriorating, planted the framework of paranoia so that when I eventually spoke the truth would sound exactly like the delusion he had described. Textbook preemptive discrediting. I had seen it in abuse cases 100 times. The abuser tells everyone the victim is crazy before the victim tells anyone the abuser is dangerous. And it works because the story arrives first. And first stories are the ones people believe. Where were you when Mom died? Meredith said, and the question hit me like a physical blow. Where were you? Dad. You were in Houston, watering her roses, talking to her photograph. Craig was here. Craig drove me to the hospital. Craig held my hand in the waiting room. Craig made funeral arrangements while you stood in the backyard with a garden hose acting like the roses mattered more than your living daughter. And now you walk into my house and tell me that man is poisoning me. The one person who showed up, the one person who stayed, she was right about the facts and wrong about the conclusion. And the gap between those two things was an ocean I could not cross with evidence or logic or love. She was right that I had been in Houston, right that Craig had been present, right that I had failed the living by mourning the dead. And she was wrong that Craig's presence meant safety, wrong that showing up and poisoning someone were mutually exclusive, wrong that the man who held her hand in the waiting room could not also be the man who held the drawer key at 11 o'clock at night. But I could not say any of that, because saying it required her to dismantle her entire understanding of her marriage, her safety, her children's father, and no one dismantles their entire world because their estranged father asks them to. Craig appeared. He must have come home early, or perhaps he had never left. Perhaps he had been listening from the garage or the upstairs office. He walked in with the measured stride of a man who had anticipated this exact scenario. "Sir." His voice was gentle, concerned, weaponized compassion. "Meredith needs rest. She does not need pressure right now. I know you care. But this is not helping." He put his arm around Meredith. She leaned into him, into the man who was killing her. And he looked at me over her shoulder with an expression so perfectly constructed that even I, with 35 years of reading faces on autopsy tables, could not determine whether it was sympathy or victory. I left. She did not ask me to stay. She did not walk me to the door. Craig closed it behind me, gently, the softest sound a closing door can make. And somehow that gentleness was worse than a slam, because a slam is honest, and a soft close is performance. And I was learning that Craig performed everything, even the way he shut a man out of his daughter's life. The highway at night has a way of making your thoughts louder. Without scenery, without billboards, you can actually read. Without the visual clutter of daytime driving. The only thing left is the road and the engine and the inside of your skull. And my skull that night was a courtroom where I was simultaneously the prosecutor, the defendant, and the jury. And every verdict I reached was appealed by the next mile marker. Maybe Meredith was right. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe 5 years of retirement and 2 years of widowhood had corroded whatever mechanism used to separate clinical observation from personal paranoia. Maybe the tremor was benign. Maybe the Mies lines were zinc deficiency. Maybe Owen was just a sleepy kid in a growth spurt. Maybe the locked drawer contained protein powder or creatine or some fitness supplement Craig was embarrassed about. Maybe I had watched too many autopsy tapes in too many dark rooms, and now every kitchen looked like a crime scene, and every husband looked like a suspect, and every breakfast smoothie looked like a delivery mechanism. The doubt was suffocating. It filled the car like exhaust fumes, invisible and toxic, making everything blurry, making the lane markers swim, making me grip the wheel harder just to feel something solid. I was 68 years old, alone on a highway at 10:30 at night, driving away from a daughter who had just confirmed every fear I had carried for 20 years. That my profession had made me unfit for human connection. That seeing death in everything was not a skill, but a disease. That I was the problem, not the solution, and never had been. I exited at Round Rock and parked at a rest area. Killed the engine. Sat in the dark. The dashboard clock read 10:41. The parking lot was empty except for a semi-truck idling 3 spaces over, its running lights casting orange rectangles across the asphalt. I looked at Catherine's contact in my phone. Still there. I had never deleted it. Her voicemail still existed somewhere in the cellular network. Her voice saying, "You have reached Catherine Pennington. Leave a message and I will call you back with a smile." I had called it 11 times in the first month after she died, just to hear her voice, just to pretend for 7 seconds that she was busy and would call back. I pulled up her photograph instead, the one from our 35th anniversary. She was laughing at something I had said, head tilted back, eyes crinkled, the kind of laugh that rearranges a face into its most honest configuration. I talked to the photograph the way I talked to the one on the bookshelf. Catherine. She threw me out. Again. Second time in 3 years. She said I see dead people everywhere. She said Craig warned her about me. She said, where were you when she needed you? And the worst part is, she is right about the last one. I was not there. You were dying, and I was at the morgue because there was always another case, always another body, always someone else's tragedy that needed my attention more than your cancer treatments needed my hand. And after you died, I watered your roses because roses do not argue back, and photographs do not tell you that you chose work over family for 35 years. I sat there. The semi-truck's engine hummed. A coyote crossed the far end of the parking lot, trotting with the unhurried confidence of an animal that owned the darkness. What if I am wrong? Catherine. What if Meredith is right, and I am the broken one? What if 35 years of reading death has made me incapable of reading life? What if the maze lines are nothing and the tremor is nothing and Craig is exactly what he appears to be? A good husband caring for a sick wife. And I am the old man who cannot stop autopsying the living because the dead were the only patients who never disappointed me. The doubt peaked, crested, and then broke. Because underneath the doubt, underneath the fear and the guilt and the self-recrimination, there was a number. 4 times normal. Arsenic at 4 times the biological threshold in my daughter's hair. Numbers do not have opinions. Numbers do not project. Numbers do not carry the accumulated damage of 35 years of professional deformation. Numbers simply are. And 4 times normal meant someone was introducing arsenic into my daughter's body with regularity and precision. And no amount of self-doubt could change the chemistry. I drove the remaining hour to Houston, parked in my driveway, did not go inside immediately, sat in the car with the engine off and the windows down, and the night air carrying the faint sweetness of Catherine's roses from the backyard. Then my phone vibrated. Evelyn Marsh. Text message. Walter. Call me when you can. Found something about Denise Palmer that changes things. I called immediately. Evelyn answered on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. Her voice carried the tone I associated with breakthroughs, the controlled urgency of a scientist who has found something that reshapes the entire picture. Denise Palmer does not exist, she said. I ran her through every database I have access to. Nursing license registries, state employment records, Social Security verification. Denise Palmer appears in exactly 0 systems before 2022. No credit history, no tax filings, no previous employment records. She materialized just over 2 years ago with a complete identity and no past. I felt the hair on my forearms rise, the same pattern as a fabricated identity. Clean. Too clean. No accumulated history, Evelyn continued. So I ran facial recognition through law enforcement databases. Got a match? 89% confidence. Her real name is Denise Hargrove. Married Craig Hollowell in San Antonio in 2013. Divorced 2016. Except here is the problem. Walter. The divorce filing lists separate addresses, but property records show them at the same address until 2017. The divorce was administrative, not residential. They continued living together for at least a year after legally separating. I could not speak. My brain was restructuring every observation, every interaction. Every moment I had seen Denise hand Meredith a glass of green liquid with a professional smile and a cheerful prognosis. "Walter," Evelyn said quietly, "the nurse caring for your daughter is your son-in-law's ex-wife operating under a false identity. Whatever is happening in that house, it is not a marriage with a side affair. It is a coordinated operation." I hung up, sat in the driveway. The roses smelled sweet, and the air was warm, and the stars above Houston were dimmed by light pollution, but still visible if you knew where to look. And I did. Because forensic pathologists spend their careers finding what others miss in the places others stop searching. Denise Palmer was Denise Hargrove. The nurse was the ex-wife. The caretaker was the co-conspirator. And my daughter, lying in bed next to one of them while the other measured her supplements each Thursday, had no idea she was surrounded. Evelyn's office in the Harris County Medical Examiner complex smelled the way it always had, like coffee and formaldehyde and the particular staleness of a room where paper files outnumber living occupants. I had spent thousands of hours in rooms like this, reviewing slides, dictating findings, arguing with detectives about cause of death over lukewarm sandwiches from the vending machine. The familiarity should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like putting on a uniform I had tried to retire, and finding that it still fit perfectly, and hating that it did. Evelyn had printed everything. She spread the documents across her desk the way she used to spread autopsy photographs, methodically, chronologically, each page positioned so I could read them without turning my head. She had been doing this for 40 years, and she was very, very good at it. "Start here," she said, tapping the first document. Denise Hargrove, born 1986, San Antonio. Nursing degree from a community college in 2012. Married Craig Hollowell, also of San Antonio, in 2013. Divorce filed 2016. As I said, property records show continued cohabitation until 2017. Then Denise vanishes, stops filing taxes. No employment records, no credit activity, no address registrations. Nothing after 2017. Craig, meanwhile, stayed visible. Evelyn moved to the next set of documents. He married Laura Hollowell in Austin that same year, 2017. Built a new domestic life while Denise erased herself from every database. Then Laura died in 2021, and within a year, Craig refreshed his own trail. Same name, but new social security number, new driver's license, clean break from anything connected to Laura or San Antonio. And then, in 2022, Denise reappears. New identity. Denise Palmer, private wellness nurse. No traceable history before that year. Two people who erased their pasts at different times, but resurfaced in the same orbit around your daughter. Same faces, new lives, coordinated. Why keep the same name? I asked. Evelyn shrugged. Arrogance. Or practicality. Changing a first and last name requires more documentation and creates more risk of exposure. He kept Craig Hollowell because it was easier than building an entirely new identity from scratch. Changed enough to break the digital trail, kept enough to avoid mistakes. Smart, not paranoid. She moved to the second set of documents. This is where it gets worse. Walter. I did not think it could get worse. I was wrong. Laura Hollowell, she said. Craig's wife under the Hollowell name. Married 2017 in Austin. I felt the room tilt. Craig had a wife before my daughter. He had never mentioned this. Meredith had never mentioned this. Either she did not know or he had concealed it so thoroughly that the absence of Laura from their shared history felt natural. An unasked question in a marriage where the husband controlled the narrative. Laura died in 2021. Evelyn continued. She was 34. Cause of death on the certificate reads cardiac failure secondary to chronic myocarditis. The attending physician was a general practitioner, not a cardiologist. No autopsy was performed. No toxicology screen was ordered. The case was closed as natural causes. She slid a copy of the death certificate across the desk. I read it with the eye of a man who had reviewed thousands of death certificates and knew exactly where physicians cut corners and why. The diagnosis was plausible on paper. Myocarditis can cause sudden cardiac failure in young women. It happens. But the clinical notes attached to the certificate told a different story. Chronic fatigue over several months, progressive weakness, peripheral neuropathy in hands and feet, hair thinning, gastrointestinal distress. I looked up at Evelyn. She was already nodding. Same symptoms, she said. Laura Hollowell's clinical trajectory matches Meredith's current presentation almost exactly. Chronic fatigue, progressive weakness, neurological symptoms, all attributed to a vague autoimmune condition that was never definitively diagnosed because the patient died before specialists could narrow it down. I stared at the symptom list. My hands lay flat on the desk, palms down, pressing against the wood as though I could anchor myself to something solid while the floor disappeared beneath me. Arsenic, I said. Chronic arsenic poisoning presents as progressive fatigue, peripheral neuropathy, hair loss, gastrointestinal distress, and ultimately cardiac failure if exposure continues long enough. Myocarditis is a common misdiagnosis because the cardiac involvement in late-stage arsenic toxicity mimics inflammatory heart disease. Evelyn pulled up one more document. Laura Hollowell's life insurance policy. $500,000. Beneficiary. Craig Hollowell. Paid out in full. 60 days after death. No investigation. No contest from Laura's family. He killed her. I said. The words sounded like someone else's voice. Flat. Clinical. Disconnected from the explosion happening inside my chest. Same method. Evelyn said. Same patients. Same timeline. Laura's symptoms began approximately 5 months before death. Meredith's symptoms have been present for approximately 4 months based on your observations. If the dosing pattern is consistent, and there is no reason to believe it is not. Meredith has roughly 3 to 5 months before the cumulative toxicity reaches the threshold that killed Laura. 3 to 5 months. I did the calculation automatically, the way my brain did every calculation, converting time into data and data into urgency. 3 months was 90 days. 5 months was 150. The midpoint was 120. 4 months. If Craig was following the same protocol, my daughter had approximately 4 months before the arsenic in her system reached lethal concentration. Evelyn was watching me. She had known me for 40 years. She knew what I looked like when I received results that changed a case, and she knew what I looked like when I received results that changed my life. And she could see that this was the second kind. "There is more," she said. "Laura's family." She had a younger sister named Diane. Diane filed a complaint with San Antonio police 18 months after Laura's death. Said she believed Craig had been responsible. Said Laura had confided in her, that Craig controlled her medication, her food, her doctor visits. Police investigated for 2 weeks, found insufficient evidence, closed the case. But Diane also sent an anonymous tip to the FBI last year. Financial Crimes Division. The tip referenced Craig's insurance payout and suggested a pattern of spousal targeting for financial gain. "FBI has a file," I asked. "Preliminary," Evelyn said. "Not enough for a warrant. Not enough for charges. But enough to flag the name Craig Hollowell in their system. If we bring them biological evidence of a second poisoning, same method, same perpetrator, they will have enough." She looked at me across the desk. "Walter, you are not dealing with a man who had an affair or embezzled from a joint account. You are dealing with a serial predator who marries women, poisons them over a period of months, collects life insurance or inheritance, and moves on." Laura was not his first identity. Craig Hollowell was not his first name. There was someone before Laura, before Denise, before any of this. And there will be someone after Meredith if we do not stop him now. I sat in Evelyn's office for 20 minutes after she finished. The documents lay on the desk like accusation. Each page a chapter in a story that began before I knew it existed and would end with my daughter's death if I did not intervene. Craig Hollowell was not a husband. He was an infrastructure, a system built for extraction, optimized through repetition, refined with each victim. Laura was the prototype. Meredith was the production model. And the nurse, the ex-wife, the woman who handed my daughter glasses of green liquid every Thursday and smiled, was the supply chain. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. "There is one more thing. Walter." She turned her screen toward me. I have been going through old Harris County cases, cross-referencing Craig's known aliases with our forensic database, and I found something that involves you directly. Galveston, 2009. A woman named Rebecca Aldridge. She rotated the monitor. The screen showed a case file I had not opened in 15 years. At the bottom, in my own handwriting, a signature and a conclusion I had written in 30 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon when I was tired and overworked and rushing to the next case. My signature, my conclusion, my mistake. Rebecca Aldridge was 31 years old when she died. I know this because I signed the document that said so. I signed it on a Tuesday afternoon in October of 2009 at the Harris County Satellite Office in Galveston. And I signed it the way I signed 300 other documents that year, quickly, efficiently, with the mechanical precision of a man processing a caseload that exceeded his capacity by 40% and climbing. Evelyn's screen showed the full case file, digitized from paper records, scanned in high resolution, every page preserved with the forensic fidelity of a system designed to ensure that nothing was ever truly lost. I read my own handwriting from 15 years ago. It was sharper then, the letters more angular, the confidence of a man in his early 50s who believed his instincts were infallible because they had never been tested against a failure he was willing to acknowledge. Rebecca Ann Aldridge, date of death, October 14th, 2009, location of death, residence, Galveston, Texas, spouse, Daniel Aldridge, cause of death, complications arising from undiagnosed type 2 diabetes mellitus, contributing factor, diabetic ketoacidosis leading to multi-organ failure, manner of death, natural. Recommendation for further investigation, none. I stared at that last line. Recommendation for further investigation, none. 7 words. I had written them in approximately 3 seconds. The pen had moved across the paper with the fluency of routine, and I had turned to the next file in the stack. And Rebecca Aldridge had become a closed case, a statistic, a name in a database that no one would search again unless someone gave them a reason. Evelyn pulled up the cross-reference. Daniel Aldridge's social security number matches Craig Hollowell's current records, she said. Same 9 digits. Different name attached. Daniel Aldridge filed for Rebecca's life insurance 30 days after death. $280,000. Paid without contest. No investigation triggered because the death was ruled natural by the examining forensic pathologist. She paused. By you, Walter? I knew. I did not need her to say it. I had already read the signature at the bottom of the page, already recognized my own handwriting, already felt the specific kind of cold that starts in your stomach and moves outward to your extremities when you realize that the worst thing you have ever done is not something you did deliberately, but something you failed to do carefully. Evelyn pulled up the clinical notes from Rebecca's physician. I read them the way I should have read them 15 years ago, with the attention of a man who understands that every detail matters and that rushing a conclusion is not efficiency but negligence. Progressive fatigue over 4 months. Peripheral neuropathy in both hands. Hair thinning. Chronic nausea attributed to dietary irregularity. Skin pallor. Weight loss of 14 pounds over 12 weeks. I could hear my own breathing in the quiet office. Each symptom was a brick, and together they built a wall that blocked every excuse I might have constructed. These were not the symptoms of undiagnosed diabetes. Diabetic ketoacidosis presents acutely, not progressively. It does not cause MACE lines or peripheral neuropathy in the pattern described. It does not produce gradual hair loss over months. What these symptoms described, what they had always described, was chronic arsenic poisoning. The same clinical picture I had recognized in Meredith in approximately 4 seconds at a dinner table in Austin. The same picture I had missed entirely in Rebecca Aldridge in 2009 because I was tired and the caseload was heavy and the next file was waiting. Evelyn was quiet. She had worked beside me for decades. She understood what I was seeing. Not just the medical evidence, but the moral evidence. The proof that my negligence had consequences measured not in paperwork, but in bodies. I could have caught him. I said. My voice did not sound like mine. It sounded like a recording played at the wrong speed. If I had ordered a toxicology panel, if I had looked at these symptoms for 60 more seconds, if I had questioned the husband, if I had done any single thing differently on that Tuesday afternoon in October of 2009, Daniel Aldridge would have been arrested. He would have been charged. He would have gone to prison. And he never would have changed his name to Craig Hollowell. Never would have married Laura. Never would have killed Laura. Never would have moved to Austin. Never would have met Meredith. Never would have sat at my daughter's kitchen table calling me sir while measuring arsenic into her morning smoothie. Evelyn did not contradict me. She was too honest for that, and too kind to confirm what we both knew. Instead, she said, "The file shows you were processing 341 cases that year with a staff shortage of 2 pathologists. The Galveston satellite office was handling overflow from Hurricane Ike recovery. You were working 18-hour days for 7 consecutive months. Context, not excuse." I said, "No." She agreed. Not excuse, but context matters. Walter, you did not ignore evidence. You made a judgment call under conditions that would have compromised any pathologist. The symptoms were ambiguous without a toxicology panel. And ordering a panel on every case with fatigue and neuropathy would have collapsed the already strained system. You made the call that 90% of your colleagues would have made, and one woman died because of it. Then another woman died because of it. And now my daughter and my grandson are being poisoned by the man I set free with a signature and a recommendation of none. 90% is not good enough when the 10% is your own family. I reached across the desk and turned the monitor so I could see the signature again. My name in my handwriting in ink that had dried 15 years ago on a conclusion that was wrong. Dr. Walter Pennington. The letters were confident, assured. The handwriting of a man who did not doubt himself because doubt was a luxury that high-volume forensic work could not afford. I thought about all the things that had flowed from that signature like water from a cracked dam. Rebecca buried without justice. Daniel Aldridge walking free with $280,000. Daniel becoming Craig. Craig marrying Laura. Laura dying the same way Rebecca died. Same symptoms, same patients, same invisible poison administered by the same hands. Craig collecting another insurance payout. Craig meeting Meredith. Craig marrying Meredith. Craig sitting at my table, shaking my hand, calling me sir, playing with my grandchildren, sleeping beside my daughter, and measuring her death in half teaspoons every night at 11 o'clock. All of it traceable to a single moment, a single page, a single signature written too fast by a man who should have looked longer. Evelyn said something I did not fully hear. I was staring at the screen, at the photograph of Rebecca Aldridge attached to her file. Young, dark hair, smiling in what looked like a driver's license photo. She had been alive when that photograph was taken. She had been someone's daughter, someone's sister. Diane, the sister who had tried to tell the police, who had sent the anonymous tip to the FBI, who had spent years trying to get someone to listen. Diane had been right. And the system, my system, the system I had spent 35 years serving with what I believed was rigor and integrity, had failed her because the man at the center of that system had signed too fast on a Tuesday afternoon. I closed my eyes, opened them. The file was still there. My signature was still there. Rebecca was still dead, and Laura was still dead, and Meredith was still being poisoned, and none of those facts would change no matter how long I stared at a screen in a room that smelled like coffee and formaldehyde and the accumulated weight of every case I had ever touched, and the one I had touched too lightly. I drove home from Evelyn's office at 4 p.m. and did not turn on the radio. Did not turn on the air conditioning despite the heat. Did not turn on anything that would introduce sound or comfort into a car that needed to be as empty and still as the inside of my skull was full and roaring. The signature, my signature, written in 3 seconds, dried in 5, filed in a cabinet that no one opened again for 15 years. And during those 15 years, the man I had certified as a widower of natural causes had killed at least one more woman, married my daughter, and begun killing her too. The arithmetic of negligence was precise and merciless. One signature equaled 3 victims: Rebecca, Laura, Meredith. A 4th if you counted Owen. And I counted Owen, because arsenic does not care about your age or your dinosaur books or the gap in your smile where your front teeth used to be. I parked in my driveway, sat in the car. The engine ticked as it cooled. Catherine's roses were visible through the fence, red and white, and climbing the trellis she had built from hardware store lumber and determination. I used to tease her about that trellis. It leans. Catherine, let me fix it, she would say. It leans toward the sun. Walter, that is not leaning. That is reaching. She had a way of reframing my criticism as observation, and my observation as limitation. She was the only person who ever made me feel that seeing less might sometimes be more. I went inside. The house was dark. The photograph of Catherine sat on the bookshelf where it always sat, catching the last of the afternoon light through the west-facing window. I stood in front of it. My chest felt like it contained something too large for the cavity. Something pressing against my ribs from the inside, making each breath a negotiation between air and anguish. Catherine, I said, I made a mistake. 15 years ago, a woman named Rebecca Aldridge came through my office and I signed her death certificate without ordering a toxicology panel. I wrote natural causes because I was tired and the caseload was impossible, and I trusted the attending physician's notes, and I should have looked at the symptom pattern and recognized what I recognized in Meredith in 4 seconds at a dinner table. But I did not. I wrote my name, and I moved to the next file, and Rebecca Aldridge was buried and her killer walked out of Texas with $280,000 and eventually walked into our daughter's life. The photograph stared back. Catherine's smile, unchanged. I wondered what she would say, whether she would comfort me or hold me accountable or both simultaneously, the way she had always been able to do, wrapping truth in tenderness so that it hurt less but still left a mark. I think she would say, "You cannot undo the signature, Walter. But you can make sure it does not claim another name." I sat in my chair, the one beside Catherine's chair, the one she used to sit in while we watched the evening news together, her feet tucked under her, a cup of tea balanced on the armrest. Her chair was empty. It had been empty for 2 years. I had not moved it. I had not even adjusted its angle. It sat exactly where she had left it, pointing toward the television that I rarely turned on anymore because watching the news alone felt like attending a party where the only other guest had left early and permanently. Rebecca Aldridge. I said her name out loud. I owed her that. I owed her the sound of her name spoken by the man who had failed her. I did not know what Rebecca looked like beyond a driver's license photograph. I did not know if she had children, hobbies, dreams, a favorite restaurant, a fear of heights or spiders or the dark. I knew only that she had been poisoned by a man she trusted, and that the forensic pathologist assigned to determine why she died had determined wrong. And that determination had allowed her killer to continue killing with the confidence of a man who had passed inspection. I owed Rebecca more than her name. I owed her a correction. And the only correction available was ensuring that Meredith did not join her. I stood up, walked to the desk in the spare bedroom that I had converted into a home office years ago, opened the drawer where I kept legal pads and pens and the organized detritus of a career that still occupied physical space in my house, even though it no longer occupied official space in my life. I pulled out a pad and wrote, November 4th, 2:47 in the morning. To Rebecca Aldridge, I owe you an apology you will never hear. On October 14th of 2009, I signed your death certificate with a conclusion that was wrong. I wrote natural causes because I was overworked and careless, and because your symptoms were ambiguous enough to justify the shortcut I took. They were not ambiguous. They were arsenic. And I should have seen it. I did not see it. And you died without justice. And your killer went free because of my signature. I cannot undo that. I cannot give you back the years he stole or the life he ended. But I can promise you this. Your death will not be the last entry in his record. Meredith Pennington Hollowell, my daughter, is alive today with arsenic in her body put there by the same man who killed you. And I will not sign another wrong conclusion. I will not look away because looking closer is uncomfortable. I will not rush because the next file is waiting. There is no next file. There is only this one. And this time, I will get it right. I put the pen down, picked up my phone, called Evelyn at 2:51 in the morning. She answered on the second ring because Evelyn Marsh was the kind of woman who slept with her phone on the nightstand and answered every late call because late calls in our profession meant someone needed help that could not wait for business hours. I am not stopping, I told her. Not for Meredith's anger, not for Craig's performance, not for the FBI's timeline, not for anything. I have 3 victims on my conscience because of a signature I wrote too fast. Rebecca is dead. Laura is dead. Meredith is alive. And she is alive because I happened to see her fingernails at a dinner table and recognized what I should have recognized 15 years ago in a file I closed too quickly. I am not closing this one. Evelyn was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, I know, Walter. Because this time you are not just saving your daughter. You are saving yourself. She was right. The distinction mattered. For weeks I had been telling myself I was investigating Craig to protect Meredith. That was true, but incomplete. I was also investigating Craig to answer for Rebecca, to correct a professional failure that had metastasized across 15 years and 3 states and at least 3 victims. Every hour I spent building this case was an hour of penance for the hours I had not spent in 2009. Every piece of evidence I gathered was a counterweight to the evidence I had failed to order. Every sleepless night was a payment on a debt I owed a woman buried in Galveston, whose sister had tried to tell the police, and the police had listened the way I had listened, which is to say, not enough. I am not an investigator who happened to find a personal case. I am a man who created this case through negligence, and now must solve it through diligence. The symmetry is not poetic. It is punitive. And I accept it because accepting it is the only way I know how to apologize to a dead woman I never met and a living daughter I may never speak to again. I hung up the phone, sat at the desk. The legal pad with my letter to Rebecca lay face up under the lamp. I did not tear it out or fold it away. I left it there, visible. A reminder every time I walked past that the man watering roses in Houston and the man who signed too fast in Galveston were the same man. And the only way to reconcile them was to finish what I should have started 15 years ago. Evelyn called 3 days later with something that did not fit. She had been reviewing Catherine's estate paperwork, not for legal reasons, but because I had asked her to help me organize documents I had been avoiding since the funeral. Grief makes you a poor administrator. 2 years of letters, insurance forms, beneficiary designations, and personal effects inventories had accumulated in a box in my closet, unsorted, untouched, radiating the specific emotional charge that prevents widowers from opening the containers that hold their dead wife's paperwork. Walter, Evelyn said, I am looking at the personal effects inventory from Catherine's estate, the one Meredith signed when she received Catherine's jewelry and personal items. There is an entry here, dark oak jewelry box, brass hinges, sticky note attached reading, for Meredith. Only open when she truly needs her mother. Do you know what is inside it? I knew the box. I had given it to Meredith after the funeral. Catherine had been specific about it during her last weeks, even as the morphine made her words float and fragment. The box goes to Meredith. She will know when to open it. Promise me. Walter, I had promised. I had handed the box to my daughter at the reception, amid casseroles and condolences and the hollow choreography of post-funeral socializing, and Meredith had taken it with the careful hands of a woman accepting a relic, and set it on a shelf where it had apparently remained, sealed, for 2 years. Why, I asked Evelyn. Because I think you need to open it, or rather, I think you need to find it and see if Meredith ever opened it. Because Catherine was a thorough woman. Walter, and thorough women who know they are dying do not leave mystery boxes with cryptic instructions unless the mystery matters. I drove to Austin the next morning, not to see Meredith. She had not answered my calls since the confrontation. I still had a key to her house from the year I helped with renovations, and I knew her schedule. Tuesday mornings she taught until noon. Craig worked in the Domain District. The boys were at school. Denise came Thursdays. The house would be empty. I let myself in at 9:15. The guilt of entering my daughter's home uninvited sat on my shoulders like wet concrete. But the guilt of inaction sat heavier. And between 2 kinds of guilt, I chose the one that might save her life. The jewelry box was in Meredith's bedroom closet, top shelf, behind a stack of folded sweaters, exactly where someone would put something they intended to deal with later and never did. I took it down. It was lighter than I expected. The brass hinges were cold. The sticky note was still attached. Catherine's handwriting shaky from the medication but legible. For Meredith. Only open when she truly needs her mother. I opened it. Inside were 3 items. A pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to Catherine's grandmother. A folded photograph of Meredith at age 7, sitting on Catherine's lap, both of them laughing at something outside the frame, and a letter. Sealed in a cream-colored envelope with Meredith's name written on the front in Catherine's handwriting. The seal was unbroken. Meredith had never opened the envelope. She had never read whatever Catherine had written. 2 years. And the letter had waited in the dark beside pearls and a photograph. Patient and urgent and completely ignored, I opened the envelope, unfolded 2 pages of lined notebook paper covered in Catherine's handwriting, more controlled than the sticky note, written perhaps earlier in her illness when her hands still obeyed her fully. And I read the first line, and the floor shifted beneath me. My dearest Meredith, I am writing this because I may not have time to tell you in person, and what I need to tell you cannot wait for the right moment, because the right moment may not come before the cancer takes my ability to say it clearly. I kept reading. My hands did not shake. They went still. The way hands go still when the body decides that movement might cause the thing you are holding to become more real. 8 months ago, I received an anonymous letter from a woman named Diane. She said she was the sister of a woman named Laura, who had been married to your husband Craig before he met you. She said Laura died under suspicious circumstances in 2021. She said she believed Craig was responsible, She included a copy of a police report she had filed in San Antonio that went nowhere. I sat on the edge of Meredith's bed. The room smelled like her perfume, and the lavender sachets she kept in the closet, and the particular warmth of a bedroom that belongs to a living person. A person I was trying to save. A person whose mother had tried to save her too, in her own way, from the same threat, and failed. Catherine's letter continued. I investigated. I do not have your father's training, but I am not a fool. And the internet gives ordinary people extraordinary access. I found the divorce record between Craig and Denise Hargrove. I found the discrepancy in Craig's social security records. I found enough to know that the woman Diane described, the man who married her sister and watched her die, is the same man who married you. My wife had known. Catherine had known about Craig before she died. She had received the same tip that later went to the FBI, investigated it herself, confirmed the connection between Craig and Denise, and understood the danger Meredith was in. And she had not told me. The letter explained why. I did not tell your father because I know your father. I love him more than I have ever loved any person on this earth, and that love includes understanding his limitations. If I tell Walter, he will investigate. He will use his forensic training to dismantle your marriage piece by piece. He will be right. Meredith, he will be absolutely, factually, forensically right. And you will hate him for it. You will see his investigation as invasion. You will see his evidence as the same paranoid scrutiny you have resented since you were 16. And you will choose Craig over your father. Because Craig has been present and warm, and Walter has been clinical and distant. And presence beats evidence every time in the court of a daughter's heart. I cannot let that happen. I cannot let the truth destroy the only relationship your father has left. I stopped reading. My chest was so tight I could not draw a full breath. Catherine had understood me with a precision that felt like surgery. She had known exactly what I would do, exactly how Meredith would react, exactly how the dynamic would play out. And she had been right about all of it. She had predicted the confrontation, predicted Meredith calling me paranoid, predicted Craig's gaslighting, predicted everything, and she had died before she could execute her alternative plan. The letter's final paragraphs laid out that plan. Meredith, if you are reading this, it means you need your mother. Something has gone wrong. Perhaps you have begun to feel ill. Perhaps Craig has changed. Perhaps something has made you doubt what you thought was safe. Whatever brought you here, trust what I am telling you. Leave Craig. Do not confront him. Do not tell him you know. Take the boys and come to Houston. Your father will protect you. But do not ask him to investigate. Just leave. Quietly. Safely. I have included Diane's contact information. Call her. She will tell you about Laura, and then you will know. Catherine had written an escape plan for a daughter she would never see escape. She had chosen silence over disclosure, trust over evidence, departure over confrontation. and she had died before she could explain to Meredith why the box mattered. And Meredith had put the box on a shelf and left it there for 2 years, while Craig measured poison into her breakfast every morning. I sat on the bed holding the letter. The room was silent. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower droned. I thought about Catherine, my wife, the woman I had talked to every night for 2 years through a photograph on a bookshelf. She had known about Craig. She had kept it from me. Not out of malice or distrust, but out of a love so precise that it accounted for my flaws as well as my strengths and chose to work around both. She had not believed I could save Meredith without losing Meredith. And she had been right, because I had tried exactly that, and Meredith had thrown me out and called me paranoid and chosen Craig. Just as Catherine had predicted, I looked at Catherine's photograph in the hallway, visible through the open bedroom door. For the first time in 2 years, I did not know what to say to her. She had loved me enough to protect me from myself. She had loved Meredith enough to write an escape plan from her deathbed. And the letter that could have saved everything had sat unopened in a dark closet for 730 days because grief makes you avoid the things that carry the weight of the person you lost. And Meredith had been grieving and busy and trusting and wrong. I folded the letter carefully, put it in my jacket pocket, returned the jewelry box to the shelf, locked the house, drove to the highway, and somewhere on Interstate 35, between Austin and Houston, I understood that the letter was not just evidence of Catherine's knowledge. It was a weapon, not against Craig, against his control over Meredith's perception. Because when the moment came, and it would come, and Meredith had to choose between her father's word and her husband's performance, the letter would speak in the only voice Meredith had never doubted. Her mother's. The FBI field office in Houston occupied a building on Justice Park Drive that looked like every other federal building in every other American city, glass and concrete, and the particular blandness of architecture designed to convey authority without personality. I had been inside it twice before, both times as an expert witness in federal poisoning cases. Both times I had walked in with the clinical detachment of a professional, lending his expertise to someone else's tragedy. This time the tragedy was mine, and detachment was no longer possible. Special Agent Ramirez met me in a conference room on the 3rd floor. He was 46, lean, with the careful posture of a man who had been trained to communicate control through body language. Evelyn sat beside me, her presence a professional anchor in a room that felt increasingly personal. Ramirez had been assigned to Craig's file after Diane's anonymous tip the previous year. He knew the name. He knew the pattern. What he lacked was evidence sufficient for a federal warrant. "Dr. Pennington," he said, spreading documents across the table. "We have been aware of Craig Hollowell, also known as Daniel Aldridge, for approximately 14 months. The tip from Laura Hollowell's sister flagged financial irregularities consistent with insurance fraud. However, Laura's death was ruled natural causes by the examining pathologist, and without a toxicology report contradicting that ruling. We cannot establish homicide as the predicate offense for a federal investigation. The examining pathologist was me," I said, "and the ruling was wrong." Ramirez looked at me for 3 seconds without blinking. "I understand," he said, and I appreciate you coming forward. But self-correction of a forensic finding from 15 years ago does not automatically generate probable cause. What it does generate is a basis for reopening Rebecca Aldridge's case and potentially exhuming Laura Hollowell's remains for toxicological analysis. That takes time. Time I was not sure we had. I laid out the current evidence. Hair analysis showing arsenic at 4 times threshold in Meredith. Urine analysis showing 1.5 times in Owen. My direct observation of Craig preparing a blended drink with an unidentified white substance from a locked drawer. Denise Palmer's confirmed identity as Denise Hargrove, Craig's former wife. The Delaware LLC had not yet mentioned, but Evelyn had discovered through financial database searches, registered 4 months ago in Meredith's maiden name, with Denise listed as resident agent. The life insurance policy Craig had recently increased on Meredith to $750,000. Ramirez listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "This is compelling circumstantial evidence. But for a federal prosecution under wire fraud or interstate conspiracy statutes, we need direct evidence of intent. Specifically, we need audio or video of Craig and/or Denise discussing the poisoning, the financial scheme, or the disposal of assets. Circumstantial cases against sophisticated perpetrators fail at trial. Juries want to hear the defendant say it in their own words. You want me to wear a wire," I said. "I want you to consider participating in a controlled encounter," Ramirez corrected with the precision of a man who had testified before oversight committees. "A situation where Craig feels comfortable enough to discuss his plans in the presence of a recording device. Family gathering, holiday meal. A context where his guard is down and the conversation can be steered toward financial planning and Meredith's health. Owen and Noah's birthday," Evelyn said. "October 19th. 4 weeks away." Ramirez nodded. "That gives us time to obtain judicial authorization for the recording, position support units, and brief Dr. Pennington on conversational elicitation techniques." He looked at me. "You would need to attend the birthday party, wearing a concealed recording device, and engage Craig in conversation that produces admissible statements about the financial structure, the insurance policies, and his relationship with Denise. If he references the LLC, the insurance increase, or any aspect of the poisoning, we have grounds for immediate arrest and asset seizure. 4 weeks. I did the math automatically. 28 days. During those 28 days, Meredith would consume approximately 28 smoothies prepared by Craig. Owen would share approximately 20 of them, each smoothie containing approximately half a teaspoon of whatever was in that locked drawer. 28 more doses. 20 more for Owen. Arsenic accumulating in their organs, their blood, their hair, their nails, building toward the threshold that had killed Laura in approximately the same time frame. "I need to talk to Meredith," I said. "No," Ramirez said firmly. "If Meredith knows, she will confront Craig. If she confronts Craig, he will stop dosing, destroy evidence, and potentially flee. We have seen this pattern with sophisticated poisoners. They have exit strategies. Go bags. Offshore accounts. If Craig suspects the investigation, he disappears, and we lose the chance to prosecute." He paused. "More importantly, if he suspects and does not flee, he may accelerate. A cornered poisoner facing exposure may increase dosage to lethal levels to eliminate the witness before arrest. Telling Meredith right now could get her killed faster. The sentence landed like a blow to the sternum. Telling my daughter the truth could kill her. Staying silent was keeping her alive. The paradox was monstrous, And it was real. And it pinned me to my chair with the weight of its impossibility. I tried calling Meredith that evening. The phone rang 6 times. Craig answered. "Sir, Meredith is resting. She has been very fatigued this week. The doctor adjusted her medication. She asked me to tell you she will call when she feels up to it." His voice was warm, concerned, saturated with the performance of a devoted husband managing his wife's declining health. Each word was a cage bar sliding into place. She is not calling because she does not want to talk to you. Or she is not calling because he will not let her. The distinction mattered enormously and was impossible to determine from a phone call answered by the man controlling both the phone and the woman who owned it. 2 days later, Evelyn delivered worse news. Meredith signed a financial power of attorney, granting Craig authority over the inheritance account. Signed Tuesday, notarized Wednesday, filed Thursday. Craig moved fast. He had accelerated the timeline by at least 2 weeks compared to our projections. "She signed?" I said, hearing the flatness in my own voice. "Under what conditions, we do not know," Evelyn said. "She may have signed willingly, trusting her husband's financial guidance. She may have signed under duress, too weak to resist. She may have signed while cognitively impaired by arsenic's neurological effects, which would make the document legally voidable but only if we can prove impairment at the time of signing." Craig was tightening the net. Power of attorney gave him access to the $1.1 million inheritance. The LLC gave him a vehicle to move it offshore. The insurance increase gave him a fallback payout if the financial route failed, and Meredith, weakening daily, was cooperating because she trusted the man administering her poison and distrusted the father trying to save her. I went home, stood in front of Catherine's photograph, pulled her letter from my jacket, read it again. "I did not tell your father because I know your father." She had been right. But she had also been right about something else. Something buried in the letter's final lines. "Your father will protect you. Not your father might protect you. Will." Catherine had known, even as she chose not to tell me, that if the moment came, if the crisis arrived, I would do what I had always done. See what others missed. Follow the evidence. Protect the patient, even if the patient hated me for it. The letter sat in my pocket like a loaded weapon. When the birthday party came, when the wire was hot and the FBI was listening and Craig was performing his devoted husband routine across the table, that letter would be my ace. Not to prove Craig was guilty. The recording would do that. The letter would prove something more important. It would prove to Meredith that her mother had seen the same truth I had seen and chosen a different path and failed. It would prove that seeing danger was not paranoia. It was inheritance. Catherine had seen it too. She had just tried to handle it without the tools that my profession provided, and hers did not. And in that failure, in Catherine's well-intentioned silence, lay the vindication of my well-intentioned noise. 4 weeks, 28 days until the birthday. 28 more smoothies. I counted them the way I used to count slides under a microscope, knowing that each one brought us closer to either justice or catastrophe, and the margin between the two was a single recorded conversation at a 9-year-old's birthday party. Tasks: 11 through 14 complete. Approximately 4,200 words delivered. The narrative now covers both major twists, Twist 3 and Twist 1, and sets the stage for the climactic birthday sting operation. Shall I continue with tasks 15 through 18 to complete the story? Press 1 to proceed. 10 days before the birthday party. I found the evidence that would have ended everything, and then I destroyed it. I was on the family cloud account. Meredith and I shared it, had for years, a digital repository of photographs and videos that flowed automatically from our devices into a common storage space. I had logged in looking for recent photos of Owen and Noah, something to ground me in the reality of who I was protecting, while the investigation consumed every waking thought. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to remember that the endpoint of all this documentation and surveillance and moral compromise was two boys who deserved a grandfather, not an operative. I scrolled through folders, school pictures, Halloween costumes from last year, a video of Noah reading aloud from a dinosaur encyclopedia, and then a folder I did not recognize. Owen's Spy Kit project, created 6 weeks ago, containing 43 video files. Owen had mentioned his spy kit at dinner months ago, a toy he had received for his birthday the previous year. A plastic briefcase containing a magnifying glass, invisible ink pens, walkie-talkies, and a small camera with a suction cup mount designed to stick to flat surfaces. He had been attaching it to various locations around the house and recording what he called surveillance footage for his dossier, narrating his observations the way children narrate everything, with the absolute seriousness of a person who believes the world is as dramatic as it feels. Most of the videos were unremarkable. The backyard from the kitchen window, Noah doing homework, the family cat sleeping on a radiator. Owen's running commentary gave each video the gravity of a nature documentary. Subject appears to be napping. Will continue monitoring. Then I opened the file dated September 23rd. The camera was mounted on the side of the refrigerator, facing the kitchen counter. Timestamp in the corner. The frame showed the blender, the counter, the upper cabinets, and approximately 80% of the kitchen workspace. Owen's voice narrated from off-screen, apparently from the living room where he was watching through the spy kit's companion monitor. Commencing kitchen surveillance at 2200 hours. Suspects may be preparing unauthorized snacks. At the 11-minute mark, Craig entered the frame. The timestamp read 11:07 at night. He moved to the counter, opened the cabinet above the refrigerator, retrieved the key from behind the cereal boxes, knelt, unlocked the bottom drawer, removed the container, opened it, and tapped white powder into the blender. The camera angle was perfect. His face was visible, clearly identifiable, well lit by the stove light. The container was visible. The powder was visible. The locked drawer was visible. The sequence of actions was unambiguous, documented in continuous unedited footage with a timestamp that could be verified against the camera's internal clock. 12 seconds of perfect evidence. An 8-year-old's toy camera had captured what weeks of professional investigation had not. Direct visual proof of Craig Hollowell introducing an unidentified substance into his wife's food preparation under conditions of secrecy and concealment. Any prosecutor in the country would have accepted this footage. Any jury would have convicted on it. Any judge would have issued an arrest warrant within hours of viewing it. I stared at the screen for 4 minutes without moving. The cursor blinked beside the file name, Owen's Spy Kit Project, September 23rd. My grandson had accidentally recorded his stepfather poisoning his mother while playing detective with a toy camera. He had no idea what he had captured. The video had uploaded automatically to the family cloud, time-stamped and preserved by an algorithm that did not understand context, did not know that the footage it was storing would eventually be relevant to a federal criminal investigation, did not care that the child who recorded it was also one of the victims. I thought about what would happen if I gave this footage to Agent Ramirez. Craig would be arrested within 48 hours. The footage was legally obtained, captured by a device belonging to a household member on shared property, with no expectation of privacy violation. It was admissible. It was devastating. It was the single most efficient path to ending the poisoning immediately and permanently, and Owen would become the witness. Not by choice, not by intention, by accident, by the arbitrary intersection of a toy camera's mounting location and his stepfather's 11 o'clock routine. But the result would be the same. In court proceedings, during depositions, in media coverage, in the family narrative that would follow Craig's conviction, Owen would be the boy whose camera caught his father, the 8-year-old who sent his dad to prison, the child whose science project became prosecution exhibit A. I had seen child witnesses in my career, not as a pathologist, but as a consultant in cases where children's evidence was central to the prosecution. I had read the follow-up studies. The psychological literature was unambiguous. Children who serve as instrumental witnesses against parental figures carry the weight of that role into adolescence and adulthood with predictable consequences. Guilt, anxiety, fractured identity. The persistent, irrational belief that they caused the destruction of their family rather than documented it. I called Evelyn, told her what I had found. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My daughter Caroline testified against her mother's boyfriend when she was 12. He was abusive. She told the truth. The jury convicted. That was 15 years ago. Caroline is 27 now. She still has nightmares. Therapy twice a month since she was 13. She did the right thing, and it cost her a piece of herself that she has never gotten back. Some things save the case and break the child." Walter. The question is whether the case is worth the child. The question answered itself. No case was worth Owen. No conviction was worth an 8-year-old boy spending the rest of his life knowing that the camera he mounted on the refrigerator for fun had put his stepfather in prison. No evidence was worth the moment, years from now, when Owen was old enough to understand what the footage contained and realize that he had been playing spy while his mother was being murdered 3 feet away. I moved the cursor to the file, right-clicked, selected delete from all devices. A confirmation dialog appeared. This action is permanent and cannot be undone. Delete this file from all synced devices. I looked at the photograph of Owen on my phone, taken last Christmas. Reindeer sweater, gap-toothed smile. He was holding a gingerbread man he had decorated with so much frosting it was structurally unsound, and he was laughing because it kept falling apart in his hands. I clicked delete. The file vanished. 12 seconds of perfect evidence erased from every device connected to the family cloud. The automated backup system confirmed deletion across 3 synced accounts. Gone. Permanently. Irrecoverably. The best evidence in the case. Eliminated by the lead investigator to protect a child who would never know what his grandfather had done or why. I closed the laptop, called Evelyn. I deleted it, I said. She did not argue, did not question, did not tell me I was wrong or right or foolish or noble. She simply said, "Then we have one shot. The birthday party. The wire. One conversation. If Craig does not confess on audio, we have nothing. You just chose the hard road." "Walter, I know," I said. "Some roads are hard because they are right, and some evidence is perfect because it costs too much." I sat in my apartment in the dark. 10 days until the birthday. 10 days until I would walk into my grandson's party wearing a federal recording device under my shirt, sit across from the man who was killing my daughter, and try to extract a confession through conversation while children ate cake and blew out candles in the next room. No backup evidence, no safety net, just an old man, a microphone, and the 4 words that would either save my family or lose everything. The roses outside needed water. I would deal with them in the morning. Tonight I was the grandfather who had just destroyed the prosecution's best exhibit to protect a boy's innocence. And if the birthday operation failed, if Craig walked free, if Meredith died, if Owen got sicker, if everything collapsed because I chose a child's peace of mind over a guaranteed conviction, I would carry that choice the way I carried Rebecca Aldridge's name. Silently. Permanently. Knowing I had done what I believed was right, and accepting that right does not always mean successful. The recording device was smaller than I expected. A flat disc the size of a quarter, flesh-colored, adhered to the skin between my 4th and 5th ribs with medical-grade adhesive that the FBI technician applied with latex gloves and the focused expression of a man wiring an explosive, which, in a sense, he was. The device picked up sound within a 12-foot radius at broadcast quality. It transmitted in real time to a mobile surveillance unit parked in a plumber's van 1 block north of Meredith's house. Agent Ramirez sat in the van with 2 technicians and a federal prosecutor who had been briefed that morning and authorized the operation under the condition that all audio would be captured, preserved, and made available for defense review in any subsequent trial. I stood in my car outside Meredith's house at 8:45 in the morning on October 19th. The recording device pressed against my ribs when I breathed. My shirt was 1 size larger than usual to prevent the adhesive outline from showing through the fabric. Inside the house, I could see balloons through the front window. Blue and green. Owen's favorite colors. A banner across the living room archway read, "Happy birthday, Owen and Noah," with hand-drawn dinosaurs and rocket ships that Meredith must have made before she became too weak to hold a marker. I walked to the door. Craig opened it. "Sir, come in. Big day. The boys are wired." He smiled. The irony of his word choice was exquisite and invisible to him. I shook his hand and felt the recording device shift slightly against my ribcage and wondered if he could feel my pulse through my palm. Racing at a rate that no 68-year-old man should sustain without cardiac consequences, Owen ran to me. "Grandpa, you came." He wrapped himself around my waist with the full body commitment of a child who has not yet learned to moderate affection. I held him, felt his ribs through his shirt. Still too thin, still too tired for a boy turning 9. But his smile was real, unfiltered. The kind of happiness that only exists in children who do not yet know that the adults around them are performing. He was wearing a paper crown. Noah had a matching one, slightly askew. They had made them together from construction paper and glitter, and the glitter had migrated to every surface in the house, including Craig's polo shirt, which sparkled in the morning light with the inadvertent festivity of a man decorated by his victims. Denise arrived at 9:30. She carried a tray of fruit cups and a pitcher of what she described as natural electrolyte water for the children. "Walter, good to see you." She smiled with professional warmth and set the pitcher on the kitchen island. I watched her pour a cup for Owen. Watched her add something from a small bottle she described as liquid vitamins. Watched Owen reach for the cup with both hands. I intercepted. "Buddy, try the juice Grandpa brought." I handed him a juice box from the bag I had carried in. Apple. Sealed. Untouched by anyone in this house. Owen took it happily. Denise's expression did not change, but her hand paused mid-pour for a fraction of a second. A hesitation so brief that only someone trained to read micro-behaviors would have caught it. I caught it. By 11 o'clock, 8 children from Owen's class had arrived. The backyard exploded with the noise of 9-year-olds engaged in the serious business of celebration. A bouncy castle occupied the far corner. A table held a dinosaur cake with 9 candles that had not yet been lit. Meredith sat in a lawn chair watching, too exhausted to participate but present, smiling when Owen waved at her from the top of the bouncy castle with the triumphant expression of a conqueror. Craig moved between indoor and outdoor with the ease of a man hosting a party he had planned down to the minute. Drinks replenished, plates cleared, conversations initiated and maintained with the parents who stayed. He was performing the role of devoted father with the precision of someone who understood that witnesses to normalcy were the best defense against future accusations of abnormality. At 12:15, the outside children were picked up by parents. Owen and Noah went to the backyard with the remaining bouncy castle time. Meredith dozed in her lawn chair in the sun. The house emptied to 4 adults: Craig, Denise, Meredith semi-conscious on the patio, and me. I began. "Craig," I said, settling into the kitchen chair with a casualness I had rehearsed 17 times in front of my bathroom mirror. "Meredith mentioned you have been restructuring the family finances. Something about consolidating the inheritance into a more efficient vehicle. How is that going?" Craig leaned against the counter. His posture opened, weight shifting to one hip, arms uncrossed. The body language of a man invited to discuss his area of expertise. "Going really well, actually. I set up a limited liability company through Delaware. Lower tax exposure, better asset protection. Meredith signed the operating agreement last month. Denise is handling the administrative filing as resident agent." Denise nodded from across the kitchen. "The paperwork is straightforward. Registration through the Division of Corporations. We structured it as a single-member LLC with Craig as managing member and Meredith as sole owner on paper. On paper. 2 words that carried the weight of the entire conspiracy. I let them hang in the air for a beat, then followed up with the precision of a man who had spent decades extracting information from reluctant sources. "What is the total asset value you are working with?" Meredith was not clear on the numbers when she mentioned it. Craig did not hesitate. 1.1 million from the inheritance, plus the increased life insurance value, which we bumped to $750,000 last quarter. The LLC gives us flexibility to manage both pools without commingling with the household accounts. Clean separation. She paused. Better for tax purposes and, honestly, better for estate planning if anything happens to Meredith's health. If anything happens to Meredith's health. He said it the way you say if it rains tomorrow. Conditional. Hypothetical. Except he was the weather. He was the rain. He was the man manufacturing the health crisis he was now referencing as a planning contingency. And he had just stated the dollar amounts, the LLC structure, and Denise's role on a federal recording device while my grandsons played in the backyard 30 feet away. I needed more. Ramirez had been specific. Dollar amounts were foundation. Intent was the keystone. I needed Craig to connect the financial structure to Meredith's declining health in a way that demonstrated foreknowledge, planning, and purpose. The insurance increase. I said, "Was that Meredith's idea or yours?" Craig smiled. Mine. She did not want to think about it. You know how she is about morbid topics. But with the fatigue getting worse and no clear diagnosis, I thought it was prudent. Denise agreed. If Meredith's condition deteriorates further, the family needs to be protected financially, Denise added. The supplement regimen I have designed should stabilize her within 6 months. But in the meantime, the insurance increase is responsible planning. Craig is thinking ahead. 6 months. Stabilize. Each word was a brick in the prosecution's wall, and they were laying the bricks themselves, voluntarily, because they believed the old man sitting at the kitchen table was a harmless retiree asking questions about money. I had the numbers. I had the LLC. I had Denise confirming her role. I had Craig referencing the insurance increase in the context of Meredith's deteriorating health. Ramirez was listening. The prosecutor was listening. The recording was clean. But I did not have the confession. Not yet. I had financial architecture described by its architects. I did not have the admission that the architecture was built on poison. For that, I needed to change the game. I reached into my jacket and removed the manila folder I had carried for 3 weeks. Inside were 4 documents arranged in the order I had rehearsed with Ramirez. I placed the folder on the kitchen table between the birthday cake crumbs and a half-empty pitcher of lemonade and watched Craig's face as I opened it. The first document was Rebecca Aldridge's death certificate from 2009. The second was Laura Hollowell's death certificate from 2021. The third was a facial recognition match from the FBI database showing Daniel Aldridge and Craig Hollowell as the same individual. The fourth was the Delaware LLC registration, listing Denise Hargrove as resident agent under her false name. Each page landed on the table with the sound of a door closing. Craig's eyes moved from one document to the next. His expression did not collapse immediately. It shifted in stages. The way a building does not fall all at once, but transfers its weight from failing supports to remaining ones until the geometry of stability becomes impossible. First, confusion. He did not recognize the documents out of context. Then recognition, as his eyes found his own name on the facial recognition printout. Then calculation, as his brain processed what the documents meant collectively rather than individually. Daniel, I said. I used the name quietly, the way you use a scalpel, not with force but with precision, cutting exactly where the tissue is thinnest. His jaw tightened. 1 second. 2. Then the performance resumed, except now it was a different kind of performance. No longer the devoted husband, but the cornered professional. Pivoting from charm to damage control with the fluidity of a man who had been caught before, or at least had planned for the possibility. He looked at Meredith on the patio. She was awake now, sitting up, watching us through the glass door with the drowsy confusion of a woman who had dozed off during a birthday party and woken to find the atmosphere inside the house fundamentally altered. Craig turned to me. "Sir, I do not know what this is about, but I think you are confused. These documents are not what you think they are. I can explain everything." "Then explain," I said. "On the record." For everyone listening, his face changed. The phrase on the record carried specific weight, and he heard it. His eyes dropped to my chest, to the shirt that was one size too large, to the area over my ribs where the adhesive held a device the size of a quarter against my skin. I watched the realization arrive like sunrise, gradual and then total. "You are recording this," he said. He did not phrase it as a question. "I am recording this." Denise stood from her chair. Her face had gone white. She looked at Craig with the expression of a co-conspirator watching the plan fail in real time. "Craig," she said, using his name like a warning. Craig ignored her. He turned to the patio door. "Meredith, babe, come inside." He used the voice, the warm one, the concerned one, the one that had convinced my daughter for 6 years that the man using it was safe. Meredith stood slowly, holding the chair for balance, and walked inside. She looked at the documents on the table, then at Craig, then at me. "What is going on?" Her voice was thin, tired, confused. Craig put his arm around her. "Your father is having an episode, babe. He broke into our house, stole your hair, sent it to a lab, and now he is wearing a wire to your son's birthday party. He is recording our private conversation for the FBI. This is what I warned you about. This is the paranoia I told you was getting worse. He was good. Even now, even with the documents on the table and the recording device exposed and the FBI van 1 block away, he was pivoting to the strategy that had worked before, the one Catherine had predicted in her letter. Make Walter the villain. Make the investigation the crime. Make the daughter choose the husband over the father. Meredith looked at me. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman being pulled in 2 directions by forces she did not fully understand. "Dad, is it true? Are you wearing a wire?" "Yes," I said. I did not look away. At my son's birthday party, her voice cracked. I reached into my jacket. Not for a document this time. For an envelope. Cream-colored. Catherine's handwriting on the front. I set it on the table beside the other documents. "This is from your mother," I said. "She wrote it before she died. She left it in the jewelry box she gave you, the one you never opened." Meredith stared at the envelope. Her hand moved toward it slowly, the way hands move toward things that might be hot or sharp or loaded with a weight the body anticipates before the mind confirms. She picked it up, recognized the handwriting. Her face changed. She opened it, read. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Owen and Noah playing in the backyard. Oblivious, innocent. Their laughter filtering through the walls like evidence of a world that still contained joy. Meredith read for 2 minutes, maybe 3. I watched her eyes track across Catherine's handwriting, line by line, absorbing the words her mother had written from a hospital bed while cancer consumed her and the knowledge of Craig's identity consumed everything else. I watched Meredith's shoulders change, the tension that had been directed at me, the defensive posture of a daughter protecting her husband from her paranoid father, shifted, rotated, redirected toward the man standing beside her with his arm still around her shoulders. She looked up from the letter, looked at Craig, not with the eyes of a wife looking at a husband, with the eyes of a daughter looking through her mother's eyes at a man her mother had identified as a threat and tried to warn her about, and failed because death came faster than disclosure. "What did you do?" 3 words. Her voice did not tremble. It had moved past trembling into something harder, something forged in the furnace of reading your dead mother's handwriting and understanding, for the first time, that the woman who wrote it had been trying to save you from the man holding your hand. Craig's arm dropped from her shoulder. The performance could not sustain itself against Catherine's voice. Against the authority of a dead woman who had no reason to lie and no capacity to be cross-examined and no vulnerability to gaslighting because she was beyond reach, beyond manipulation, beyond everything except the ink on the page and the love that had put it there. Meredith stepped away from Craig, toward me, not all the way. Just enough that the distance between them opened and the distance between us closed, and the geometry of the room shifted from a triangle with Craig at the apex to a line with Meredith and me on one side and Craig and Denise on the other. Craig tried once more. "Meredith, your mother was sick. She was on medication. She did not know what she was writing." Meredith held up the letter. "My mother knew exactly what she was writing. She knew your real name. She knew about Denise. She knew about Laura. She wrote it all down because she knew that one day I would need proof that was not my father's. Because she knew I would not believe my father. She was right about that. But she was also right about you." I said 4 words. The 4 words I had carried for 3 weeks. Rehearsed in my bathroom. Whispered into the dark of my apartment. Tested against the silence of Catherine's photograph. The 4 words that Agent Ramirez had designated as the operational trigger. The signal that the recording contained sufficient admissions and the arrest team should breach. "For the record, sir." I said them quietly, almost gently. "The way you close a book you have finished reading, 90 seconds. The front door opened with the sound of a lock being bypassed by a federal master key. Agent Ramirez entered first, badge raised, followed by 4 agents in tactical vests with FBI in yellow letters across the chest. Craig Hollowell, also known as Daniel Aldridge, you are under arrest. Denise Hargrove, you are under arrest. Federal warrants for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity fraud, and suspicion of homicide." Craig did not run. He stood very still while an agent applied handcuffs, and he looked at me with an expression that was not anger or fear or defeat, but recognition. The recognition of a man who had underestimated an opponent and was now acknowledging the miscalculation with the professional detachment of someone who understood that the game was over and the score was final. Denise was handcuffed in the kitchen. She said nothing. Her face was blank. The blankness of a person who has rehearsed this moment in their mind and decided in advance not to react. From the backyard, through the open patio door, Owen's voice carried into the kitchen. "Grandpa, why are there police at my birthday?" I walked to the door, knelt. He stood on the patio with his paper crown tilted sideways and grass stains on both knees and a juice box in one hand, looking at me with the uncomplicated confusion of a child who does not understand why the adult world has intruded on his celebration. "Everything is okay, buddy," I said. I pulled him close, felt his heartbeat against mine, rapid and small and alive. Grandpa is here. Everything is going to be okay. Behind me, Craig and Denise were led out through separate exits to separate vehicles. The birthday candles sat unlit on the dinosaur cake. Owen's paper crown pressed against my chin, and the recording device under my shirt captured the sound of a 9-year-old asking why there were police at his party, which was the kind of question that no amount of forensic expertise or investigative methodology or federal prosecution could answer in a way that a child would find satisfying. Some truths are too large for small people, and some birthdays are remembered not for the cake or the presents, but for the moment the world revealed itself to be more complicated and more dangerous and more breakable than a 9-year-old boy in a paper crown had any reason to believe. 3 days after they arrested Craig at the birthday party, I sat in a room at the FBI field office reading a spreadsheet that made me understand I had not known the worst of it. The file was recovered from Craig's laptop, encrypted inside a folder labeled Tax Archives. The kind of banal title designed to discourage casual browsing. The digital forensics team had broken the encryption in under 4 hours and printed the contents for my review. The spreadsheet contained 2 columns. The first was labeled M. The second was labeled O. Meredith and Owen. Each column listed dates, dosage amounts in milligrams, and brief notations tracking symptom progression with the clinical detachment of a laboratory technician monitoring an experiment. The M column read like a medical chart, authored by the patient's executioner. Fatigue increasing, neuropathy onset confirmed, reduced mobility this week. Good. The O column was shorter, the doses smaller, the notations more measured. Secondary target maintaining expected response curve. Adjust upward 0.2 milligrams next cycle. I scrolled to the bottom of the O column. 5 words and a number sat in the final row, and they stopped my breathing the way a hand stops a clock. Insurance policy activated. $500,000. Beneficiary C. Erhanch. Timeline 14 to 18 months. Craig had purchased a life insurance policy on Owen. $500,000 on a child who had just turned 9. With a timeline that did not describe when the policy matured, but when the boy would die. 14 to 18 months of carefully calibrated arsenic, administered through shared breakfasts and vitamin supplements, designed to produce a decline so gradual that physicians would attribute it to the same mysterious condition afflicting his mother. 2 victims, 1 household, 1 sympathetic widower holding 2 insurance checks and an empty house. I set the laptop down, stood, walked out of the room and into the corridor. Leaned against the wall beneath a fluorescent light that hummed at a frequency I will associate with this moment for the rest of my life. And I cried. Not the composed grief of a man accustomed to loss. Not the quiet tears of a widower who has learned to mourn in private. I cried the way you cry when the thing you feared most turns out to be smaller than the thing you never thought to fear. I had spent weeks terrified that Craig would kill Meredith. I had not allowed myself to imagine that the man who baked pancakes on Saturday mornings and posted photographs captioned "My little man" was calculating. In a spreadsheet. How many months it would take to murder that child for money. Evelyn found me in the hallway. She did not speak. She stood beside me with her hand on my shoulder until the shaking stopped. And then she said quietly, "You saved him. Walter, Owen is alive because you saw lines on your daughter's fingernails and refused to look away." The weeks that followed moved with the impersonal efficiency of federal justice. Craig Hollowell, born Daniel Aldridge, was arraigned on 17 charges across 3 states. Murder in the first degree for Rebecca Aldridge. Murder in the first degree for Laura Hollowell. Attempted murder of Meredith. Attempted murder of a minor. Wire fraud, identity fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy. The judge denied bail. The prosecutor described Craig as a serial predator whose methodology demonstrated planning, patience, and the systematic exploitation of intimate trust for financial gain. The sentence was life without the possibility of parole. Denise Hargrove received 15 years federal under a plea agreement. The FBI exhumed Rebecca in Galveston and Laura in San Antonio. Both toxicology reports confirmed arsenic at levels consistent with chronic poisoning. Rebecca Aldridge's death certificate was officially amended. Cause of death changed from diabetic complications to homicide by poisoning. My signature remained at the bottom of the original document, but beside it, in the margin of the corrected file, someone had written a note. Forensic error identified and rectified by originating pathologist. It was not absolution, but it was correction. And correction was all I had the right to ask for. Meredith called me from the hospital on a Thursday evening in December. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same chair where I had received Evelyn's arsenic results months earlier. The phone rang and I saw her name, and I answered with hands that would not stay still, "Dad." One word. But the way she said it was different from every other time she had spoken it in 40 years. It was not the dad of obligation or resentment. It was the sound a daughter makes when the nightmare has ended, and the only voice she wants to hear belongs to the man she spent 20 years pushing away. I drove to Austin the next morning. She was sitting up in bed, thin and pale from 3 months of chelation therapy, but her eyes were clear. Owen sat beside her coloring a picture of a rocket ship, healthy, bright, the glassiness gone from his gaze. She looked at me and said, "You saw what no one else could see. I called you paranoid and you kept going anyway. Mom tried to warn me too. She wrote that letter and I never opened it because I thought I did not need her anymore. But I did. I needed both of you. And you were both trying to save me in different ways while I was too stubborn to let either of you." I sat on the edge of her bed. Owen climbed into my lap without being asked. I held them and did not speak, because the explanations I had rehearsed were unnecessary. The evidence was in the room, living, breathing, recovering. She asked about Rebecca. I told her everything. The signature, the mistake, the 15 years. She listened without interrupting, and then she said something I did not deserve but needed more than oxygen. "You are not the man who signed too fast." Dad, you are the man who came back and got it right. 6 months later, June, Houston, 6:15 in the morning. I stood in the backyard with the garden hose, watering Catherine's roses. The sun was clearing the fence line, turning the dew on the petals into small prisms that Catherine would have called nature showing off. But this morning I was not alone. Owen held the hose. He aimed it at the red roses with the concentration of a boy entrusted with an important mission. Noah knelt beside the white roses with a watering can, his dinosaur book wedged under one arm. Meredith walked out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She had taken a teaching position at a school 12 minutes from my house. 12 minutes. The same number that once measured our phone calls now measured the distance between our front doors. She handed me a mug, leaned against my shoulder. The weight of her felt like the most important evidence I had ever collected. Dad, she said, I love you. I set down the coffee, looked at her, at Owen spraying the hose too high and laughing when the water arced over the fence, at Noah reading between pores, at Catherine's roses climbing the trellis she had built from hardware store lumber and determination. Leaning the way she said was not leaning, but reaching. I love you too. Meredith. First time in 40 years. 3 words spoken in a garden at dawn, not because I had not felt them, because I had finally learned that feeling is not enough. The people you love need to hear it said aloud, even when saying it feels redundant, even when your generation taught you that providing was the same as professing. It is not. Catherine knew that. Meredith knew that. I was 68 years old and just learning it. Standing in wet grass with a garden hose and the understanding that the most important evidence a father can present is not forensic. It is verbal. 3 words. Impossible to retract. Owen shouted from the fence. Grandpa, the roses are drinking. Look. They are drinking the water. I watched him, alive, healthy. 9 years old and growing in his grandmother's garden, watering flowers he would never fully understand the significance of. He did not know about the spreadsheet. He would never know. Some protections work best when the protected never learn they were needed. The roses needed water. They always did. But this morning, for the first time in 4 years, watering them felt less like tending a memorial and more like growing something new.